Hey, everybody, real quick. If you need a recap of The Handmaid's Tale Season 5, I've got you covered. Just hit the tab in the upper right-hand corner. It'll take you right to it. Now, Season 6 does pick up where Season 5 left off, with both June and Serena on the train, hopefully headed to safety. But I'm not going to start there. I'm actually going to start back in Canada, where things aren't going great. At least it's not going well for the United States of America. Moira, in particular, is trying to get Luke free. She goes and meets with Mark, and she says, I got Ring doorbell footage from every single house on the street that proves that Luke was doing nothing more than defending June. Mark, who is visibly stressed, tells her, okay, I'll make some calls and do what I can. But for Moira, who has worked with refugees before, she knows what that statement means. It means that she's probably just shit out of luck. That's when he gets real with her and tells her they're getting ready to shut this place down. The cabinet wants to start normalizing relationships with Gilead, and by doing so, that means that de-recognizing the United States. So there's not much we can do. Our military is depleted. We're just no match right now. And Moira is pissed. She's like, well, great, that's it? I mean, we're just going to let them win? We're just done fighting back? But Mark tells her, well, Mayday's fighting back. That's pretty surprising to Moira, who reminds him that he said that he didn't work with Mayday. But Mark tells her that they don't have many allies left and you find them where you can. That's all Moira needs to hear. She tells Mark she needs to help with this. She knows she can be useful because she saw a bunch of black market stuff go down when she was at Jezebel. She knows that Mark probably needs the help. People that can get inside, people that could sneak over the border. But the fact that Moira was at Jezebel's is shocking to Mark. He mentions how nobody leaves Jezebel's, and then he questions how exactly she was able to get out of there. And she tells him, I killed a commander. And it seems like that has Mark looking at Moira in a whole new light. Now, at New Bethlehem, Nick is freed from custody and brought back to his house where his wife, Rosie, is just, she's not happy with his behavior. But Rosie isn't the only one in the house. Her dad has arrived as well, High Commander Wharton. He's come all the way from D.C., and he wants to meet with Nick, where Nick immediately owns up to the fact that he knows why Rosie is pissed at him, and he thinks that she has every right to be. Wharton, though, doesn't seem mad at Nick. He figures that Nick has a lifetime to make good with his daughter. Nick also, though, has to make good with Commander Lawrence, to which Wharton says, I'll try to smooth it over with him. I'll catch him at the golf course and put your name in good favor. Commander Wharton also seems very sympathetic to what Nick did, but he does also tell him it's kind of time to put away that idea. You've got my daughter. You've got a child on the way. You kind of got to grow up. He basically talks to Nick like a father figure. But before he leaves, he does mention how he'll be staying in New Bethlehem because, after all, he's got a grandchild on the way. Now, back on that train, it is awkward between June and Serena. While June would be well within her right to out Serena right then and there because it's pretty clear that Serena probably shouldn't be on that train and probably has fake papers that got her on that train, June doesn't do that because Serena is with Noah. No, instead, she actually helps Serena out. Like when Serena has to go to the bathroom, June watches Noah. But don't get it twisted. These two are not allies. They're not friends. And even though it's pretty clear that Serena would like to be June's friend and like to be June's ally, June isn't interested. Serena, though, is trying very hard to get through that tough exterior. She asks June exactly what happened with her arm, and when June says, yeah, I got run over by a truck yesterday, Serena compliments her and says that she's a really tough, resilient woman. Things, however, take a turn when June ends up falling asleep because she's sleep deprived, and when she wakes up, Nicole is gone. Now, they're on a train, so Nicole couldn't have gotten far, and she didn't. Serena took her all of like 20 feet away, but that does not sit well with June, and June grabs Nicole and tells Serena, don't you ever do that again. Don't touch my child. Now, Serena thinks she's being ridiculous. I mean, where are they going to go? They're stuck on this train. And Serena points out she was trying to do June a favor. She figured that when Nicole woke up, she would get Nicole out of there so that Nicole didn't wake June up. It's pretty clear June needed the sleep, but June doesn't care. June, remembering that this is the woman who very much had a hand in keeping Hannah in Gilead, wasn't about to let her steal her other baby. even if the intentions were good. But June has another problem. She is not feeling well. I mean, she visibly looks ill. And even though she's trying to push through it, because Serena is right, June is a tough, resilient woman, it's simply taking a toll, whatever it is. June, trying to push through to go find food on this train or a satellite phone or something, goes to leave because, well, the baby needs food and she really wants to talk to Luke. But Serena stops her and says, come on, I mean, you have to admit, it makes sense for us to stick together, right? And June tells her, Serena, we are not together. June doesn't get too far, though, before this illness ends up crippling her to the ground, and Serena goes and tries to find a doctor. Serena's able to find a doctor, and she brings the guy straight to June, and June ends up having an infection because her arm was so damaged, and she didn't really get great care, so he's going to treat her, and she should be feeling better. But in the meantime, Serena's trying to do good. She tells the doctor and a bunch of other people that really mothers and expecting mothers should be the priority on these trains. It's not something anybody is disagreeing with. And while Serena tries to be a good Samaritan, all the while June is kind of scoffing at this because it just seems like Serena is trying to make up for all the bad things that she did in Gilead. And June, knowing exactly who Serena is, just sees right through it. But the thing is, that's exactly what Serena is trying to do. She is trying to make good because she does see that some of the things that she did back in the day weren't the right thing. After June is treated, she is able to use a satellite phone to get in touch with back home. She's not able to talk to Luke, but she finds out the details from Moira of what happened to Luke and the fact that he's arrested. When June comes back, Serena inquires as to whether or not she was able to get in touch with Luke, and she says, no, I wasn't. He was arrested, and she fills her in on the details. Luke's being charged because the man that ran June over ended up dying, and even though Luke was defending his wife, that's not the way the law sees it. In that moment, Serena tries to be a friend to June and be an optimist and tell her that, everything will work out and her husband will get out and they'll be reunited and as a family and all that. But June says, Serena, do I need to remind you that Hannah is still in Gilead? She's still a prisoner? And that was, in fact, something that Serena did forget. June then informed Serena that on the phone call with Moira told her that they weren't going to Vancouver because Vancouver is done taking in refugees. She's not sure where exactly that train is headed, but it's definitely not headed there. This is really stressing out June because she doesn't know where she's going, and wherever she is going, Luke won't be there. Again, though, Serena tries to be an optimist, reminding June how she perseveres and how she'll find a way and all of that. And June is vulnerable with Serena and starts to break down a little bit and says, I don't know if I can be alone again. And that's when Serena says, well, then we will find a way. I will help you. But June makes it clear she doesn't want Serena's help. And Serena knows that, but she doesn't care. Serena vows to find a way to help June, and if she wants to accept that help, great. But if not, all right. Serena Joy is actually making an effort. She understands where June is coming from completely, but for her, she needs to help June. She needs to make right what she did so wrong. As the train ride continues, Serena continues to go around and be the Good Samaritan. Because of this, she's quite popular with the women on the train. During the long ride, they actually kind of have a little bit of a therapy session where the women talk about the people that were left behind in Gilead, mainly kids that were left behind. When Serena, though, tries to join in on this and act like she is a part of it, and she was a part of these women, and she did suffer what they suffered, June once again gives her that cross-eyed look. She then, though, tells her story about losing Hannah, about how the Guardians drove them off the road, and how she wasn't fast enough. That's the way she looks at it. She wasn't fast enough, and she gave up her daughter. Serena tells June, they were soldiers. I mean, there was nothing you could do. You got to stop beating yourself up over it. But June's been beating herself up over it for 6 seasons. That's when the doctor comes back in the train and pulls June aside to take a look at the wound that he was treating earlier. In reality, though, he wants to have a private conversation with June. He asks her, how well do you know the person that you're traveling with? And June says, pretty well. We've known each other for a while. Why? And that's when the doctor says, I don't think she is who you think she is. And I think if you knew who she was, you wouldn't let her anywhere near your child. But I know who she is. And I've alerted the authorities and they're on their way to arrest her. This is all out of earshot of Serena. And June looks back and sees Serena and sees Noah and asks the doctor, okay, fine, but promise me that nothing will happen to her baby, that her baby will be safe. But the doctor doesn't make that promise. Instead, he goes to examine Noah, but all while doing so, he starts telling a story about what he was back in Gilead, which is a doctor, obviously, but somebody who worked in the fertility clinics. And he starts mentioning how it was very rare you would ever see a woman in there. You would remember them. As he starts talking more and more, it becomes clear to Serena that this guy is talking about her, and this guy recognizes her. That's when Serena gets a little nervous and asks for her baby back, but the doctor continues, saying what was even more strange was when a commander would show up. And every once in a while, a commander would bring their wife. And every once in a while, that wife would actually have the best questions, and you'd remember her. At this point, Serena is in full panic mode, trying to get Noah back. And the doctor does give Noah back, but he says, he's really a beautiful boy, Mrs. Waterford. Serena Joy Waterford, that's you. And when the women hear this on the train, they look and they're like, oh my God, it is her. They can't believe it. They all know that she got on there with fake papers, but they all have vengeance in their eyes. Serena tries to tell the women that she left Gilead because she wanted freedom for her son, but the women don't care. That's when June steps in front of Serena and tries to calm the situation and tell the women to calm down, but they don't want to calm down. June tries to remind the women that she was already punished. They took her finger for speaking out, but again, the women don't care. They want their own punishment. And what's making the issue worse is Serena can't help herself. She starts defending the idea of Gilead, the fact that the America that they want so badly was hell on earth, essentially. She's not exactly making a case for herself. She's riling up these women so much that when the police do show up, June is relieved because she thinks the police will actually help Serena. They take Serena and Noah away, at least they'll be safe. But when the police officer looks at Serena's papers, he says, looks good to me. See ya. And June tries to step in and say, no, you don't understand. I know who this woman is. I was her handmaid. This is Serena Joy Waterford. You have to arrest her. All the while, Serena's like, June, what are you doing? And June's saying, trust me, Serena, I'm trying to save you here. But the police officer, he knows what he's doing by not taking Serena in. He tells Serena that back in Gilead, he had a wife and a child, and they both died in the colonies. And the child would have been 11. So he has no plans of taking Serena in or helping her. He goes back where he came from, and the women that want vengeance tell everybody in the car, hey, if you don't want to be here, you better get out now because it's about to get ugly. And while this is going on, June is still trying to talk down this mob that is forming, but they don't care. So realizing it's a losing effort, June tries to get Noah, but Serena's not giving him up. And in a last-ditch attempt to save Serena, June pulls the train's emergency brake. It thrusts everybody down, but it gives Serena and June enough time to escape and lock the women in their car. June opens up the door to the train and she tells Serena, you gotta jump, but Serena doesn't want to. There's nothing out there. She doesn't know where she would go. And quite frankly, she's just dumb. I mean, she's a full-on mob behind her ready to kill her. And it seems like she'd rather choose that than jumping from a train. So it gets to the point where June just shoves her off the train. Once the women find out what June did, they look at June as a traitor. But June doesn't care. She knew that those women were going to kill Serena, and Lord only knows what would have happened to Noah. So in her mind, she did the right thing. Hours later, the train finally arrives at its destination, which is Alaska. June and Nicole go to check in at the refugee camp, and as they're kind of waiting for their name to be called and they're getting situated, June hears a very familiar voice say, June Osborne. And when she turns around, it's her mother. In episode 2, June wakes up in Alaska in her mother's house, and she goes downstairs to see her mother and Nicole. It's as if for a split second, she's back to a little semblance of normalcy. Her mother is beside herself with joy about the fact that she's holding her granddaughter, even though she just met her and she had no idea she existed. But then the two women get into exactly how June's mom ended up in Alaska, how she even survived the colonies. Because as June says, I saw a picture of you in the colonies, like, you're supposed to be dead. But June's mom lets her know that she had a little bit of an exemption. You see, Gilead needed nurses. So the fact that she was a nurse gave her special privileges, and she was forced to treat people instead of actually serving in the colonies. Yeah, she was there for a little bit, but it was mostly as just a medic. Then, 6 months ago, her camp was liberated by the United States Army, or what's left of it, and she came to Alaska. She wasn't planning on being at that camp very long, but she stayed. And the reason she stayed was because of June. She called every single embassy that she could, trying to find out where June was, because she knew that her daughter would fight, because that's what she raised her to do. So even though she didn't have concrete proof that June was out of Gilead, she just had a hunch that June was going to do everything in her power to escape that hell. But tracking down June wasn't easy, because at these camps, you only have a finite amount of time to make a phone call. It's basically like 5 minutes a week. So June's mom would use that 5 minutes a week to really, really try and search. But she would call, she wouldn't get answers. When she did get answers, they didn't know anything. But the one thing she wasn't about to do was go to the other state left in the United States, which would be Hawaii, because that would be even harder for June to get to. She figured that after a while, if she just stayed put, maybe her daughter would find her, which is exactly what happened. They then get into a quick update about Hannah and what's going on with her, or at least everything that June knows. The big thing that June tells her mother is that she's gotten really close to getting Hannah out, but she's not done fighting. What really crushes June, though, is the fact that the last time she saw Hannah, Hannah didn't remember her. The mother and daughter embrace in a hug, and Holly just says aloud, "Man, you really are tough." Now that June has found her mother, the big thing for her is getting in touch with Luke. And the good news for Luke is Mark was able to free him from jail. The bad news for Luke is he wasn't able to expedite the hearing. And it's probably going to take about 3 to 4 months for that to happen, which doesn't sit well with Luke. In Luke's opinion, he did nothing wrong. He was defending his wife who was run over by a truck. But to the Canadian government, well, he's just a refugee who broke the law. Luke is dead set on doing one thing: getting Hannah back. He tells Mark, "Do you know what they do to girls? Do you have any idea? And every day that goes by, my daughter is in danger. I can't just sit back and do nothing." And that's when Moira says, "Well, Mayday wants to do something." Mark tells him that what Mayday wants to do is find the commanders who shot the plane down and kept Hannah in Gilead, and they want to kill him. And as soon as Luke hears that, he's game. After leaving the police precinct, Moira and Luke go to Rita's, and things aren't great over there either. The fact of the matter is, things aren't great for any refugee in Canada. Canada is sick of the refugees, and life has not been great for them. Because of this, Rita tells both Luke and Moira, "I'm thinking about going to New Bethlehem," which comes as a huge surprise to Moira. She's like, "Rita, you can't trust those people." But Rita lets her know that they might have a lead on her sister. And for Rita, that's all that matters. Before they can really get into any kind of conversation about Rita possibly going to New Bethlehem, they get a phone call, and it is from June. And June is elated to hear from Luke. Now, before Luke picked up the phone, he did tell both Rita and Moira, don't tell her anything about Mayday, because Luke and Moira are planning on joining the cause. Now, for this particular phone call, it's just a happy phone call. June puts Holly on the phone so she could say hello to Luke, who is shocked that she's alive. And then they get into the whole train ride about how Serena was on the train. Even though she has no idea what happened to Serena, you can kind of tell from her voice that she is concerned. Luke then gives her an update on the fact that he's going to have to wait about 3 to 4 months for a hearing, and then they say goodbye. She's going to try to contact them as much as possible. Now, fast forward 2 months, and she's having trouble contacting Luke. Every single time she picks up the phone to call him, she's not getting an answer, and she's starting to get concerned. Finally, she decides not to call Luke, but to call Mark, who lets her know that Luke and Moira decided to join Mayday. They didn't want to tell her. June Osborne is not about to sit on the sidelines and let her husband and her best friend join a cause on her behalf and not be a part of it. She needs to go back and join the fight. And Mark told her there's one big, big way that she can help. It's by contacting Nick. Because Nick had a meeting with Mark where Mark gave him a cell phone. He wanted some troop movements and locations of eyes and commanders. But since that initial meeting, Nick has gone AWOL. Mark can't get a hold of him. And he knows that Nick will take a phone call from June. So when June heads back to her mom's place, she lets her mom know that she's got to go fight this Mayday cause. And her mom is like, what are you talking? No, you can't leave. You're not built for that. But June lets her mom know, yeah, I've done some things. June quickly explains to her mom that there's a commander that only will talk to her, and her mom is able to figure out that it must be Nicole's father. This then sparks a conversation about how Nick is different from other commanders, and Holly just doesn't believe that. Because Holly had to treat these people and was around them so much, she figures that they're all the same. But June tells her, no, he's different. This was different. He will take my phone call. And it sparks a very, very big debate. Not only about June leaving, but about June leaving and bringing Nicole along with her. It's not long into the debate where Holly realizes that her daughter is going to leave no matter what, so she begs her to at least let Nicole stay. Stay with her. But the conversation gets so intense that June says something she's going to regret. She says to her mom, why would I leave her here so you can abandon her too? And as soon as she says that, she immediately feels bad. When cooler heads prevail, the two women do talk it out. June does apologize to her mom, telling her, I know you didn't abandon me. Her mom is able to talk some sense into June by convincing June to let Nicole stay. And it wraps up with June telling her mother that Nicole's real name is Holly, after her. A couple days later, June says goodbye to her mother and her daughter and heads off to go join Mayday. When she does, Mark is waiting outside of this abandoned house. June heads inside. There's a bunch of people waiting, and June introduces herself. Now, as for Nick, the little tiff he had with Commander Lawrence is water under the bridge when he meets with him. They actually joke about the whole situation, and Commander Lawrence reiterates that he had nothing to do with what happened to June. Before they can really get into any kind of conversation, Nick's father-in-law walks in and interrupts. He showed up to talk to Commander Lawrence about the New Bethlehem project. Commander Lawrence is proud to say that applications for New Bethlehem are through the roof. It's like the best private school you could think of. It's very, very high demand. Commander Wharton has to admit that it was a crazy idea, but it has worked out. And it's going to make Gilead a whole lot of money. But he does have one question. Where's Mrs. Waterford in all this? Because Lawrence made Serena the global ambassador of New Bethlehem, but she's been missing. And even though Lawrence hasn't given Serena Waterford much thought, it's pretty clear that Wharton wants Serena at New Bethlehem to welcome back people and have this sign of forgiveness. That's going to cause Joseph to try to track down Serena. He knows what happened with the Wheelers. He knows that they tried to control her. He knows that she escaped. But he also knows that if given time, he will be able to find out exactly where she landed on her feet. This is around the time where Nick had that meeting with Mark. But when he returned home, he and Commander Wharton had a little bit of a heart-to-heart where Commander Wharton let Nick know that because he never really had a father figure in his life, he's allowed men to control him like a puppet. He gets through to Nick by saying, every decision you make from now on, you have to think about that's a reflection to your son, about the man that its father is. This really hit home with Nick. He felt like maybe Mark was playing him. So he pulled out that cell phone and he tore up the SIM card and threw it in the fire. And that is the reason why Mark couldn't get in a hold of Nick. But as for Joseph and his fact-finding mission of Serena, he is able to locate Serena. Serena was thrown from the train. She wandered about until she found a church that was welcoming to her and Noah. Now, she did give a fake name. She used the name Rebecca. And after 2 months in this little community, she was welcomed in. She felt a part of it. She felt comfortable. And it turned out the whole fake name thing was unnecessary because the woman knew who she was all along. She read Serena's book, but she also believed in forgiveness. Serena was quite comfortable in this community until one day, Commander Lawrence and his new wife showed up. The woman who was running the community let him know that he had no jurisdiction there, he wasn't welcome there, but Serena was willing to hear him out because, as Joseph said, hey, we come in peace. Joseph just wanted to have a conversation with Serena. Now, at first, Commander Lawrence tries to convince her to come to New Bethlehem on her own merit. He makes the pitch that it would be a good thing, and Serena reminds him that there's a reason why she left in the first place. She's pretty dead set on not going to New Bethlehem, even though Lawrence lets her know that it's way different than Gilead. Women are allowed to, crazy thought here, read a book. Can you believe it? What's next? They get the right to vote? And for Serena, who obviously is a free thinker and a powerful woman, the fact that she might get some rights back is appealing. She does recognize the fact that Joseph Lawrence doesn't view her like other women in the community, but still, it's not all that enticing. And that's when Joseph has to get tough with her, and he lets her know the eyes know where she is. And if the eyes know, it's only a matter of time before the Wheelers do too. That changes everything for Serena. That night, Serena, the heads of the community that she lives in, Joseph, Naomi, they all have dinner together with Serena at the head of the table. And Serena actually leads grace, but then she announces that while she appreciated the hospitality and her time there and being welcomed in, she has a higher calling, and it's time for her to move on. She boards a flight back to New Bethlehem with Joseph, and she's basically ready to do the bidding of the commanders. In episode 3, we'll start out in New Bethlehem because it's a big day. They're hosting a bunch of foreign dignitaries. These foreign dignitaries will decide whether or not to release the refugees to New Bethlehem. So it's up to Commander Lawrence, Nick, and especially Serena to put their best foot forward and show that New Bethlehem is different than Gilead, and they're no longer committing war crimes. Even though these foreign countries don't want any more refugees, they can't in good conscience release refugees to New Bethlehem if they think that it's still the old Gilead. So basically, they're going to go on a propaganda tour. They got to make New Bethlehem seem like it's Disneyland. Now, over with the Mayday household, after June introduces herself, she pulls Mark aside and they have a conversation about where exactly Luke and Moira are. Luke and Moira went for what was supposed to be a simple pickup. They were supposed to pick up a bag, they wait for a ride, that is it. But then they got bogged down by an eyes patrol. So they're stuck in an abandoned amusement park, hoping to God that they don't get caught with no end in sight. Upon hearing this, June's pretty pissed off and asks Mark, why the hell did you let them go? And he explained it was supposed to be a simple, routine pickup. That is it. He goes on to explain that Nick is not answering any of his calls, and it's probably because of the fact that he knows it's a big day for New Bethlehem. He tells June all about Serena, and immediately she's really concerned about whether or not Serena and Noah are okay, and Mark tells her, yeah, apparently they're doing great. They've been treated like royalty. But this is why June being present is so important. Because while Nick is not answering any of Mark's phone calls, he knows that he will answer for June. So he's able to get a message to Nick through a German diplomat who tells Nick that June Osborne is waiting for him, and then he gives him the directions on where exactly they can meet up. And sure enough, not too long later, Nick shows up. He's reunited with the woman he truly loves, and they hug it out. They quickly, though, get into the reason of why they're meeting. She explains that Luke and Moira are bogged down in this abandoned amusement park, and he, as a commander, has the power to move patrols because, well, they need to get out. Nick tries to tell her, look, that's going to be really difficult. I mean, if I try to move those patrols, it's going to be fishy. I mean, I want to help, I do, but Mark's got to think of something else. And June tells him there is nothing else. He can't send in the military and risk confrontation, and Mayday can't send anyone in because of the Gilead patrols. She looks at Nick and says, look, I get it, it's dangerous, but I'll just have to drive in myself and do it. And Nick isn't about to allow that to happen. He decides to sneak June into the abandoned amusement park and try to find Luke and Moira before the eyes find them. While they head off to the amusement park, Commander Lawrence goes and has a conversation with Serena because she is such an important part of schmoozing these diplomats. But Serena isn't totally convinced that Commander Lawrence is going to be able to change the country, but more so, that Commander Lawrence is even the right guy for the job. She is very, very skeptical on everything, and she goes so far as to even question whether or not Commander Lawrence is religious. She makes him repeat a prayer, and he can't do it. She tells him, I know I can bring God here, but I don't feel God in you. She then questions him and says, why are you here? I mean, what is driving you if not for God? And he says, well, it could be God. I mean, it could be my dead wife. It could be my guilty conscience. And she questions whether or not that is God working through him. He kind of shrugs his shoulders and says, sure, I mean, you can't prove it and I can't disprove it. He then quotes the Book of Mormon, and she kind of just loses it and says, I mean, who are you? I mean, tell me I'm not crazy. And he says, no, you're crazy. I'm crazy. We're both crazy. But we both broke this country, and now we need to fix it. He implores her to work with him in order to do that. They then head out to meet with the diplomats, and most of the talking is done by Commander Lawrence. Nick is nowhere to be found. They don't really question it too much. In fact, the only person that questions it is Commander Wharton, who at first has a conversation with Serena about returning and how it's great, but then he questions, where exactly is my son-in-law? And nobody knows. It's Serena who points out, yeah, it looks like Commander Lawrence is actually doing pretty good without Nick. But that's around the time the diplomats start questioning whether or not they are being brought along on a propaganda tour. Whether or not New Bethlehem really is different than Gilead, and you can tell they are very skeptical. They own up to the fact that while they don't want any more refugees, and they'd certainly like to get rid of them, they can't send them back without proof of concept. And that's when Serena shines. She not only sticks up for New Bethlehem, it not only makes a difference of the fact that she's a woman, but the thing that seems to clinch the deal is Noah. And Noah comes out, and the fact that these women are seeing a baby, it just brightens up their day. Then Rose comes out, pregnant, and the women are beside themselves. So they've seemingly won over the diplomats. After this little spectacle, Commander Wharton walks up to Serena, and he's amazed that she was able to do this. He's really, really impressed. She makes a snide comment about the fact that he must have missed her book tour, and he says, yeah, no, admittedly I did. I apologize. Towards the end of the day, you've got Commander Lawrence, Wharton, Serena. They're all toasting because these diplomats are all on board. Serena mentions how they'll probably be overrun pretty soon by families who are desperate to reunite, and that's when Commander Lawrence mentions expansion. Commander Wharton, though, tells him, hey, don't get ahead of yourself just yet. I don't know how ready this country is for one New Bethlehem, let alone a bigger one. But it's the women in the room who actually push back on that idea. Serena and Naomi both say, no, we should be expanding. We should try to get this place bigger. Commander Lawrence piggybacks off this, and it's basically 3 versus 1 in the conversation about whether or not to expand New Bethlehem. Wharton doesn't back down. He just says, we'll keep the conversation going, but you really did a good thing today. And then he once again questions where Nick was in all of this. Lawrence, having no idea where Nick was, defends him and says, oh no, I sent him somewhere. This group kind of disperses, but late at night, the Lawrences get a visit from Aunt Lydia. That's because Aunt Lydia found out that Janine was working at a Jezebel's and she wants to save her. But when she gets there, she finds out that not only is Janine working there, a bunch of her former handmaids are working there. The thing is, none of them want saving. The only thing they want is for Aunt Lydia to go away. Janine goes so far as to say, if you want to help me, forget I ever existed. But Aunt Lydia isn't about to just give up. So that night, she visits the Lawrences, and she begs the Lawrences to take Janine back, which Naomi goes, yeah, we're not doing that. We gave her one chance, and she blew it. So no, fat chance on that ever happening. Aunt Lydia then makes a pitch to Commander Lawrence, but Commander Lawrence says, no, I mean, look, them working at a Jezebel's isn't ideal, but it's better than working in the colonies. And Aunt Lydia cannot believe that that's the stance he's taking. She thinks there's got to be a better life for these girls, but Commander Lawrence is basically telling her there's not. It doesn't matter about the fact that they had children, including, by the way, the one living in Commander Lawrence's house. No, none of that matters. They're looked at as stained, so the best life they can hope for is at a Jezebel's. Aunt Lydia says, you know what, I'll make another pitch to Naomi. She'll hear me out this time. But Lawrence laughs at her and says, she's an old-school Gilead wife. She's not Serena Waterford. And Aunt Lydia is kind of taken aback by that comment and says, what do you mean? And that's when Lawrence fills her in on the fact that Serena is back, living in New Bethlehem, making an impact. As Lydia is trying to wrap her brain around this, Lawrence tells her, Janine's gone. She was gone the moment you got your hands on her. Now, as for June and Nick, they get to the abandoned amusement park, but they have to keep their head on a swivel because of the eyes. They are, however, able to make small conversation, and it's during this small conversation where Nick reveals that he found out what happened to her, getting run over by a car, and he went to the hospital. And the fact that he went to the hospital means a whole lot to June. Unfortunately, though, they do get to a point where it's getting really risky. Getting to the area where Moira and Luke would be is becoming really, really impossible. Nick looks at June and says, we got to turn back. But she's not about to turn back. And this kind of sparks an argument between the two where they get into their own relationship about the fact that June clearly picked Luke, and yet here Nick is trying to save this dude's life. June explaining to Nick, look, I loved you, but Luke waited for me. He waited years for me. And that one word sticks out to Nick, loved. When he mentions it to June, she corrects herself and says, love. The fact is, Nick has lost June so many times, he doesn't really want to lose her again. And she reminds him, I'm right here, but they're not going to have a chance without us. And because he can't say no to June, they trek on, and they are able to find Moira and Luke and be reunited. Now, this is the first time where Moira or Luke are meeting Nick. So, yeah, it's a little awkward, but they are really, really appreciative of what he did, risking his life. They then head to leave, but they are caught by the eyes. Nick tells the group, go wait in the car, I'll take care of this, and he walks up to the two eyes, and they right away recognize Nick. He tries to get them to ignore the interaction, but they remind him, we have to document any rebel activity. So that's when Nick does something drastic. He shoots both of them. He then gets in the car, and he drives Nick, Moira, and June to the woods where they're going to meet up with Mark. Moira and Luke say goodbye to Nick. They thank him. And Mark also thanks Nick. But he does tell him, hey man, don't go dark on me again. I know the only reason you're here is because of her, but when she goes away, can you answer my phone calls? And Nick doesn't reveal that he destroyed the SIM card. He just says, yeah, I'm kind of busy. I can't just be at your beck and call. Mark tells him, you got to honor our agreement or I'll expose you. And Nick says, no, you won't. I'm no use to you dead. And even Mark kind of looks at him and says, yeah, okay, you got me there. But Mark then goes in the car and he lets June and Nick say their goodbye. They start doing the typical, hey, take care of yourself, make a good life. But then June says, no, you know what, Nick, we do this all the time. And then you know what happens? A couple episodes later, here we are again. So let's not. Let's just say, see you next time. And that's what they do. Nick goes back to New Bethlehem and June goes back to Mayday. In episode 4, it's a big day for Commander Lawrence as he's about to become High Commander Lawrence. As he prepares for the ceremony, Naomi walks in and she tries to act like a wife, get close with him, some physical touching, but he pulls back. He wants nothing to do with any of that. Because of the cold nature of how he greeted her, she feels it necessary to tell him that now that he's a high commander, there's a lot of pressure on him. She tells him that the high commanders have a very specific set of priorities, which he cuts in and says, I know their priorities. Power will come from reform. They know I'm their man. While he's cold to Naomi, the person he's not cold to is his daughter, Charlotte. She comes in and she shows him the picture that she drew, and he loves it. He's really warm to her. He keeps it in his pocket. So at least there's somebody in that house that he enjoys. Commander Lawrence then heads over to go through the ceremony. The high commanders that are in attendance swear him in. The other commanders watch on, and Commander Lawrence is now High Commander Lawrence. As soon as the ceremony is over, Commander Wharton walks over to Lawrence and asks him how close the United Kingdom and Mexico are to normalizing relations. And Lawrence says, yeah, I think we're close. I mean, New Bethlehem is everything their leaders want. They get rid of the refugees, and their barren wives want to come and breathe in the sea air. That's when a Commander Bell gets the attention of the entire room and tells them that their car is waiting for them to take them to the celebration, which will be at Jezebel's. It's something that Commander Lawrence has really no interest in, but he's going to go anyway. Commander Bell invites Commander Wharton, but Commander Wharton just right away turns down the offer. To which Commander Bell mentions how his father, who must be a high commander in Washington, says that Commander Wharton doesn't join them at Jezebel's there either. And Wharton gives Bell a line about how his father is dedicated to Gilead and some mumbo-jumbo about vices. It's very biblical. The message, though, is clear. Wharton will not be joining them. You get the sense he really doesn't approve. Bell then turns his attention to Nick and asks him if he wants to go. And Commander Lawrence says, no, Nick, you should come. And you could tell that by Lawrence inviting Nick, he really is just doing it for a wingman purpose. But it's Commander Wharton who steps in and says, no, Nick, Rose has dinner prepared for us. While this is going on, Serena is outside waiting for a special guest to New Bethlehem. It's Rita. Rita has decided to go to New Bethlehem because she got word that they had a lead on her sister who she hasn't seen in years. When she arrives on that bus, there's Serena waiting to greet her, and Serena is very, very nice to Rita. Rita's cordial enough. I mean, she hasn't forgotten about what Serena did. But her main focus is clear. She wants to know where her sister is, and Serena tells her, I had to pull a lot of strings, and I assure you she will be here. But one of the big reasons why Serena pulled those strings is she wants Rita to stay. And she asks her, would you consider staying? But before Rita can even answer that, she sees her sister walking up, and she's reunited. She runs up, she hugs her, they embrace. They both talk about how they tried to find one another, but the main thing is they're back together. Serena then decides to let the two sisters catch up. She remembered that Rose had mentioned how she was craving sweets now that she's pregnant, and Serena decided to drop her off a pie. When she did so, though, Rose was sleeping, but Commander Wharton had a ride back home from the ceremony. And while Serena thought that it was going to be a quick drop-off, Commander Wharton says, I'd like some. Because it's become pretty obvious at this point that Commander Lawrence likes Serena, but he has zero game. So the two sit down, they enjoy pie. At first they talk about Rose's pregnancy and how it's a blessing. They segue into the fact that Rose's mother died at a young age. And then they get into morality and how every child deserves a chance based on the economic climate and what happened with Gilead, all that. He mentions how Serena's faith in the reforms is really a credit to New Bethlehem and how Commander Lawrence is lucky to have her out there campaigning on the behalf. She tells him that she just appreciates having this platform and having a voice, and he admits that he knows that wasn't always the case. He then gets real bold. He tells her, a better man would have encouraged your influence. Ho, things are getting spicy. When it's time for her to go home, Commander Wharton decides to walk her home, and he tells her how she won't remember this, but he saw her at one of the balls in D.C. years ago, and he thought she was gorgeous. Unfortunately, at the time, she was married. And don't worry, folks, he prayed for God's forgiveness because he coveted another man's wife. To which she cuts in and says, well, by that point, he was less of a man and more of an albatross. He continues, though, just spitting fire, telling her how he admits that he wished he was the one who was dancing with her that night. And then they hear music, and he decides, you know what? No time like the present, baby girl. Let's dance in these streets. It's not a sexy dance at all. No, it's more like 1940s slow dancing, but they're doing it until they're caught by Aunt Lydia. And this is the first time Aunt Lydia has seen Serena Waterford back. She doesn't say it outright, but with her eyes, she tells them, hey, you two need to leave some room for the Holy Spirit. Something I heard a lot in my grade school dancing years. Now, Wharton's son-in-law, Nick, he had to go greet Rita into where she'll be staying. And Rita sees him and mentions how it's great that he seems to be doing great. But then she asks him, is it true what they're saying about this place, how it's different? And he says, yeah, it looks like it. And it's my job to keep it that way. When she hears this, she tells him, then I'm going to stay, but only until you can get my family out. He tells her that it might take 1-2 years and asks if she's okay with that. And she says, yeah, for my family, that's fine. All the other commanders, though, they're at Jezebel's. Lawrence is doing his best to act the part, but he is visibly uncomfortable, especially when he sees one of the girls at Jezebel's is Janine. Commander Bell remembers that Janine was at one point his. And since it's his night, he decides to gift Janine to Commander Lawrence. Knowing that he's her best option for that night, he accepts. They go into the bedroom, but he makes it clear right away, we're not going to be doing anything. And that's fine with Janine. She doesn't really trust Commander Lawrence anyway. She gives him a whole lot of attitude. She says some really mean things about Naomi, which Commander Lawrence agrees with. But the whole dynamic, the whole mood in the room changes when Commander Lawrence pulls out the picture that Angela drew and he hands it to her. Janine asks him, what's going to happen with her? And he assures her, she's got a good life. Janine nods and says, yeah, now. But what about later? I mean, bad things happen to Commander's daughters, too. Are you going to help her? And he assures her, I will do everything I can to keep her safe. While Janine never thanks him for what he did, giving her the picture or just keeping her daughter safe, she does appreciate it. And Commander Lawrence does actually care for Angela. You see this when he gets home and he reads her a bedtime story. Now, over with Mayday, June is trying to get acclimated, but Fact is, she wants to get the hell out of there. She got Luke and Moira safe, and now she wants to get back to Alaska. The problem is, Luke and Moira have no interest in going to Alaska just yet. They're deep in Mayday, and they want to make these commanders who kept Hannah in Gilead, well, they want to make them pay. That was the whole reason why they headed to that abandoned amusement park. That was the drop-off of the list of commanders who were responsible for shooting that plane down and keeping Hannah in Gilead. And now that they have that list, they can act on it. June kind of gets a hint at this when Mark comes over and tells Luke that his charges are being dropped and he's being deported to Alaska, and Luke isn't over the moon about it. He just says, oh, okay, yeah, that's good. And when they finally do have a chance to talk, that's when Luke tells her, I'm not going to Alaska right now. June thinks this is a big mistake. She reminds him that she also wants to see those commanders dead and Gilead hurt, but it's always something. You know, things aren't supposed to happen. It's supposed to be a routine mission, but things do happen. But to Luke, he hasn't had a chance to hurt Gilead. June has already. Now he wants his turn to make them pay for what they did to his daughter. She makes her pitch, but Luke tables the conversation for later. Not too long later, though, the head of Mayday gets everybody together in the same room, and she goes over the plans now that they have the list of commanders who were in charge. She tells the room that they're going to hit them at Jezebel's. They're basically to go in, guns blazing. First step is to kill the commanders at Jezebel's when they're not expecting it. Next step is for the bombs to go off. And then the military rolls in. And everybody's on board with this except one person, June. She speaks up and says, really, that's your plan? You're just going to roll in and guns blazing like it's the OK Corral? That's a horrible plan. You're not going to get past security. I mean, what about the women in there? If you don't tell them they're coming, they're going to be trapped in there in the crossfire. And because June starts pushing back on the idea, a few others start pushing back on it, mentioning how they don't even know what the penthouse at Jezebel's looks like. It's risky. And Ellen, the head of Mayday, says, no, we're not going in blind. We're going to do a dry run. Thanks to the intel that Luke and Moira got, we know when the penthouse will be empty and we'll get somebody on the inside to help us out. That person will also tell the women working at Jezebel's what's up, and they should be safe. But June once again cuts in and says, yeah, but what's the plan on getting those women out? I mean, they're not collateral damage. They are people. And Ellen tells her, yeah, in an ideal world, but this isn't an ideal world. And that's when Moira speaks up and says, I'll go. I mean, I'm familiar with Jezebel's. I'll go and I'll warn the girls. And that's really risky. I mean, if Moira's caught, she's stuck in Jezebel's. They're not going to be able to get her out. When the meeting disperses, June walks up to Moira and says, you can't go. But Moira pushes back on it and says, no, I am going. I mean, I know Jezebel's like the back of my hand, and I know how dangerous this is going to be. But June is terrified for her friend. Moira mentions how she appreciates the fact that June saved her, but somebody has to save the women of Jezebel's. And June tells her, then let somebody else do it. She begs Moira to come to Alaska with them and have a life, but Moira cuts her off and says, no, I mean, look, I want that for you guys, but I can't live your life anymore. And that's a pretty jarring comment for June to hear. Now, they're doing all of this as intel pours into the printer, and it's basically the girls that they know are at the Jezebel's. And this stops the conversation because when they get Janine's photo, it shocks the both of them. They thought Janine was okay. They had no idea that she's in Jezebel's. Now that June knows this, she's got to act on it. She walks up to Ellen and she says, I need you to send me into Jezebel's. I'll do the dry run, I'll scope out the penthouse, I'll connect with the women. Ellen reminds her that Moira volunteered to do this. But June makes a really good point, that if Moira gets stuck, she's stuck. They can't get her out. But if June gets caught, then they know they have a commander who will help them out, that being Nick. It seems to be settled. Ellen seems to accept the fact that it will be June heading in, and June goes to talk to Luke about it because, well, if she's heading in, then Luke isn't. Before she can even start to talk to Luke, Moira walks up pissed off because she's found out what June did. Moira is actually the one that alerts Luke to the fact that June went and talked to Ellen saying that she's going to go on the dry run and those two get to stay on the sidelines. And it starts a big fight between the three. Luke and Moira feeling like June just has to meddle. And at one point, Luke tells her, you know, you act like you want to go to Alaska and live this life, but the reality is you want to fight just as badly as we want to fight. Both Luke and Moira feel like what June did is so disrespectful. And that's when June pushes back and says, no, what was disrespectful is the fact that you lied to me for months and kept all this Mayday stuff a secret. Moira looks at her and says, I'm going to Jezebel, so either you can come with me or not go at all. And June shoots back, what are you trying to prove? But Moira tells her nothing. I have nothing to prove to you. June makes one last plea, telling them that they don't know what they're doing, they're out of their depth, they won't survive. But Moira looks at her and says, wow, you think that little of us, huh? She then tells June, do not follow me. And she turns and walks away. And Luke, he tells her that he's going to go drop off the bombs at the location that he picked because this is his chance to fight for Hannah. By nightfall, though, these two have made up. They sit down, they talk about it. June admits that, yes, she wants to fight because Hannah's in Gilead and she wants to make those people pay. And what she's really trying to save Luke from is that feeling that she's had so many times where you get so close to saving Hannah, but you're unable to. They talk about the difficulties of becoming a family again in Alaska, and then it segues into Hannah being the reason why they're going into Gilead alone on a wing and a prayer, essentially. She does get real with him and says, you know that if this Mayday plan were to work perfectly, which it won't, but if it does, that doesn't guarantee we even get close to her. And Luke says, yeah, but we gotta try. And that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna try. In episode 5, Luke, Moira, and June all gear up to go in to Gilead for the first time in years. Luke is pretending to be a driver, while June and Moira are dressed up as Marthas. Their job is going to be simple. They're going to get into Jezebel's. They're going to find a contact. They're going to let the contact know exactly what Mayday's plans are in a week, and then they meet up with Luke outside and get away. When they get in, though, they initially don't find Janine. That's the person they're looking for. That's going to be the easiest contact they have. They go to where she would be getting dressed, and one of the girls lets her know that she's probably up in the penthouse because the commanders are heading over. That wasn't part of the plan. Neither June or Moira were expecting that, and that kind of puts a wrench in this whole situation. They're going to have to adapt on the fly. They do, however, head up to the penthouse after a close call with one of their would-be bosses, I guess. And when they get up there, that's when they see Janine for the first time. She's in good spirits as she enters the penthouse, waiting for the commanders, and then she notices June. June's face is covered up, but you can tell it's June just from the eyes. This is something Janine was certainly not expecting, and she stops what she's doing. She walks over to June, and she asks, wait, are you guys Marthas now? And June tells her no, Mayday. Janine quickly tries to get the lowdown. If they're being rescued that day, this is something the girls have been waiting for. But unfortunately, the conversation is broken up when the commanders start filing in. That's when Janine gives both Moira and June the location of a meeting spot, saying, hey, I'll get there when I can, and we can discuss this further. They do run into an issue, though, as they're trying to leave the room. Commander Bell, who is probably the worst one of them all, ends up dropping a glass and demanding that one of the Marthas come over and clean it up. And that Martha's going to be June. In order not to create suspicion, she starts to clean it up, but Commander Bell starts saying, no, on my leg. Higher. And all the while, he's doing this in front of other commanders. He's trying to impress them. Until finally, one commander stops it all. It's Commander Lawrence. As soon as he tells Bell to stop, June's eyes get wide. Commander Lawrence was never somebody that would go to a Jezebel's, and yet, here he is. But the bigger issue is, if Commander Lawrence sees June, she's not sure what he's going to do. So when Commander Lawrence walks over to this Martha, at least in his eyes, and tries to kind of rescue her from this uncomfortable situation, June turns away from him and quickly gets out of the room. Her and Moira then go to that empty room and just wait for Janine. Getting away from the penthouse is going to be tricky. I mean, most of the commanders are simply talking about New Bethlehem. They're congratulating Commander Lawrence because families continue to get reunited. It's been a surprising success so far. And Commander Lawrence actually starts pitching them on expansion. He's got a few locations set out that would be perfect for expanding New Bethlehem and expanding the ideas. But Commander Bell interrupts all of that when he starts getting really inappropriate with Janine. It's becoming clear that Commander Bell plans on taking Janine into a separate room and doing God knows what to her. And Commander Lawrence doesn't want to see that happen. So he stops Commander Bell and he says, no, I'm going to take her. And once was fine. I mean, Commander Bell looks at it like, well, I gave you my girl previously. I allowed it to happen. But no, now you're just going to take her? I can't allow that to happen. He puts up a fight about it, and that's when Commander Lawrence hits him below the belt, figuratively at least. He questions Commander Bell on exactly what he's doing there, how he's incompetent, and more importantly, how nobody likes him and nobody respects him. And that shuts Commander Bell up quite a bit. It puts an end to the pissing contest, and it awards the trophy, i.e. Janine in this situation, to Commander Lawrence, where he and Janine walk into a room knowing full well that not a hand is going to be laid on her. Now, she does thank Commander Lawrence, but she reminds him, you're not a good guy. I mean, compared to them, yeah, sure, you're a good guy, but you're not a good guy. She then tells him that she has to do something, and she'll be back in about 10 minutes. But before she leaves, she wants to show him something. In the room that they're currently located in, there's a picture on the wall, but when you take the picture off, there's a peephole that allows you to spy on what's going on in the penthouse. It allows you to hear the conversations clearly. So with Janine leaving, she wants Commander Lawrence to hear exactly what his contemporaries think of him. And when Commander Lawrence goes over to that peephole, he finds out the hard truth about New Bethlehem. The fact that they're not planning on expanding. In fact, what their actual plans are is to let this go for about 3-4 years maybe, rope everybody back in, then close the borders up and get back to the way it was, back to the hard Gilead. Commander Lawrence is going to end up taking the blame for it and likely will end up on the wall. Basically, everything that these commanders have told him is just placating him. None of them like New Bethlehem, and while it is working, they don't plan on keeping it that way for long. Not if they have their way. As for Janine, she is able to get to that room. She meets up with June and Moira, she gives them a big hug, and she finds out exactly what is going on with the plan. Both Janine and Moira tell her that in a week, they're going to be rescued. They're going to come back for all the girls and Jezebels. They're going to kill the commanders. And then they get the information they need from Janine on time changes, where exactly they should go, that sort of thing. Janine does also give them a stack of letters that she says, these are from the girls. I need you to get them out. Whatever you do, get these letters to the girls' families. And both Moira and June agree. But then June completely diverts from the plan, asking Janine, do you want to come with us tonight? And Moira steps in and goes, June, what are you doing? But June continues, telling Janine that she can come with them tonight, even though she is their in for Jezebels, they can just find somebody else. And Moira has to be the bad cop. Moira has to say, no, June, we're going to be back in a week. And while it seems like Janine does understand this, and it seems like Janine is fine with this, once Janine leaves the room, Moira loses it on June. Because to Moira, this is another example of June just going rogue, doing her own thing, and not thinking about the bigger picture, i.e. Mayday. And June admits, yeah, I'm not thinking about Mayday. I'm thinking about the girl that I left behind in Chicago. That's who I'm thinking about. Me and that girl have been through hell together. Moira, though, reminds her that if Janine were to be missing, then that is going to boost up security, and their entire plan, everything they're going to do in a week, goes out the window. But this is a bigger issue for Moira. As she tells June, it's always you. Your grief, your guilt, your trauma. And what ends up happening is they get into a giant pissing contest about trauma, who had it worse in Gilead, who was sexually abused more. I mean, it's uncomfortable. But it does seem to get through to June. She admits that, yeah, Moira, you did have it worse than me. I mean, you were getting abused every day. I was only having it like once a month. And after a little bit, Moira says, yeah, you know what, but it's not like you weren't getting abused. We were both getting abused. As the two both find common ground, and they both agree that if they were to get into another pissing contest about trauma, it's letting the commanders win, a soldier interrupts it, walking into the room and taking both June and Moira off guard. At first he asks, what are you two doing? And they just say, we're cleaning. But then he sees that they have pens and papers, and that sort of thing is not allowed. The soldier can tell that this means something to both Moira and June, so he's going to use it to his advantage. He locks it up, and he tells them if they want it back, they're going to give him something. At first, he wants Moira to bend over the bed, which she tells him to F off, and then he throws her on the bed. For Moira, this has to be difficult. I mean, she's back in Jezebel's, and she's once again about to be sexually abused, but this time she's not going to take it. She fights back. And June fights back. And the strength of these two women end up taking this guy down and killing him. But now the issue is they have a body. They know they need to get the hell out of that room because the meeting with Luke is in a matter of minutes, but they also know that they need to do something with this body, and they decide to take it with them. They go downstairs into the incinerator room, and they throw the body in there, figuring that this soldier will end up coming up missing, and he won't report in, and it will be fishy, but if there's no body, they might just be able to get away with this. The issue, however, pops up when they try to leave. Right before they exit the door, June notices that Luke is there, but he's being commanded to leave. At this point, the soldier that they killed hasn't checked in, there are sirens, and there's a shutdown. Luke, who is pretending to pick up barrels, is told, "You got to come back tomorrow," but he doesn't want to leave without June. The soldier, though, isn't about to let Luke stay, and he beats the crap out of him and basically forces him to leave. And that means that June and Moira are going to be stuck there for a while. Now, they certainly don't want to be stuck in Jezebel's, so they go to leave. The problem is there's no way to leave without a commander's key card. And that's when June sees Commander Lawrence leaving Jezebel's. It's super risky, but as Commander Lawrence goes to leave, June jumps in front of his car and stops him, revealing herself. Commander Lawrence is shocked, and June says, "You got to help us out. You got to take us with you." He thinks about it for a little bit, but then he pops the trunk, he tells both women to get in, and as June is asking, "Can you take us to the border?" he just shuts the trunk, so they have no idea where they're going. Now, over with New Bethlehem, Serena meets with Aunt Lydia, who is still upset about what happened with the girls that she was looking after, the handmaids. Serena kind of looks at Aunt Lydia like, "You really thought they were going to have a life? Seriously?" And Aunt Lydia says, "Yeah, I really did. That's what I was told." And while Serena feels for the girls in this moment, it wasn't really something she was thinking about too much, but she does have an idea. She opened up that fertility clinic in Canada, and it's doing great. She figures maybe we can open up a fertility clinic in New Bethlehem. And in that instance, maybe those handmaids that aren't handmaids anymore, maybe they can work at the fertility clinic. Maybe they can help out. And it would keep them from going to the colonies, and it would keep them from going to Jezebel's. And this appears to be something that Aunt Lydia is completely on board with. She thinks it's a great idea. In fact, she calls it a calling from God. A courier, though, interrupts this conversation to let Serena know that she's being summoned by Commander Wharton. He wants to meet with her before he goes back to D.C. with Rose. So they're going to meet later that day, and it's pretty clear the two are smitten at this point. But before he meets with Serena, he has to have an uncomfortable conversation with his son-in-law, Nick. Because while all these families are being reunited in New Bethlehem, there's a security problem. Those two eyes that Nick shot, nobody knows that Nick was the one who pulled the trigger. Everybody just thinks that it was the rebels. And because of the fact that it was so close to the border, it's got a lot of commanders on edge, one of them being Commander Wharton. And the blame ends up going to Nick because he's in charge of this sort of thing. Because of this, Wharton puts a lot of pressure on Nick to find out who pulled the trigger and bring them to justice. But that's when he throws a curveball in all of this. Because Nick thought that he killed both of those guys, but it turns out he didn't. It turns out one is in a coma, and he's actually coming around a little bit. It's still a long shot that this kid would survive, but he's starting to say words here or there, and that's going to be a giant problem for Nick. I mean, if this kid really starts talking, he can tell everybody, "Oh yeah, it was Nick who pulled the trigger." Nick can't let that happen. So later in the day, he goes to visit the kid in the hospital, and it's uncomfortable. His mom is there, and his mom is just heaping praise on Nick, saying how great Nick is and how much her son looked up to Nick. All the while, Nick is just waiting for an opportunity to pull the plug on this kid. And when he gets his opportunity, he locks the door, and we're going to assume he took care of business. Now, as for Commander Wharton, he ends up meeting up with Serena at that predetermined location. And that predetermined location is a library that Commander Wharton commissioned for Serena. The library is actually going to be for the boys and the girls of New Bethlehem, but it's going to be in her name. It's also going to be in his name because he wants to make he and Serena a thing. He wants to marry her. Serena kind of gives all the reasons on why they shouldn't do this, i.e., I don't want to move to D.C., I don't want to move to Boston, but every time she gives a I don't want to do this, he's okay with it. He just wants to find a solution. He doesn't want to hear about the problems. Commander Wharton is very committed to Serena. When he finally asks the question, will you marry me? She gives a resounding yes. In episode 6, June and Moira are very concerned. While June does trust Commander Lawrence, she doesn't at the end of the day know exactly where they're headed. And she has to convince Moira, yeah, don't worry, like he's good. But it turns out Commander Lawrence is fine. He's not turning them in. Once Commander Lawrence lets June and Moira out of the car, it allows June and Commander Lawrence to finally get into it. Like, Moira thanks Commander Lawrence for saving their life, but June says no, don't thank him, because she's still pissed off about what happened with Hannah. She blames Commander Lawrence. And Commander Lawrence knows that, so as soon as he hears her attitude, he says, they knew exactly what you were going to do. There was nothing I could have done. And when June says, you could have stopped them, he yells back, you could have stopped Eleanor. That makes June actually take a step back. She says, I don't expect you to forgive me for that, but he cuts in and says, I can't forgive myself. I mean, I caused this mess of this country, and these people are about to use my reforms against me. They're going to put me on the wall. And that comes as a surprise to both June and Moira. And he goes on to explain that the people that are acting like his buddies and Jezebels, they're planning on taking all this new Bethlehem stuff and blaming him for it, eventually killing him and putting him on the wall. That's when June gets a devilish look on her face and says, what if I told you by this time next week, all of them will be dead, and you will be the most powerful commander in Boston? At the thought of this, Commander Lawrence tells both June and Moira to get in his car. He drives them both to his house, and he's planning on storing them in the basement for the time being while hearing the plan. And once he does, he tells June, you have to be absolutely sure that you're going to get all of them, because it's like a hydra. You cut off one head and 3 pop up. They are almost caught by Naomi, who hears a commotion going on in the basement, and she comes to try to investigate it, but Commander Lawrence stops her before she's able to get to the room with June and Moira. June had no idea that Naomi and Joseph were a thing now, and Joseph has to explain what happened to the old Commander Putnam. They then get back on task, and Commander Lawrence is on board with the plan because the other option is, well, the wall. But when June says, you got to get us back to Mayday, he explains, I can't just gallivant between the borders. That's fishy. Either it's the pressure of the moment or the fact that he remembers he's a high commander. He turns to both women and says, okay, you know what? No, we got to go right now because the guy that I know that's at the border, he's about to get off shift, so get in the car. But both June and Moira aren't about to leave without the letters from the girls and Jezebels. They weren't able to get them because the guy that attacked them, he put the letters in a safe, and they didn't know the combination. So June tells Joseph, I have to go back to Jezebel's. You got to get those letters for me. And he tells her he can't do it. They're on lockdown. But if Joseph can't get the letters for her, June has another person that might be able to. She asks to use Joseph's phone, and she calls up Nick and explains the situation. And Nick is able to get the letters. But because time is running out, it's going to split up both June and Moira. Commander Lawrence is going to take Moira over the border, and June is going to go pick up the letters from Nick, and Nick is going to take her over the border at a later date. There is a slight issue, though, when Nick goes to leave Jezebel's. He is caught by Commander Bell. Commander Bell makes mention of the fact that he's never seen Nick in here. And Janine, who is with Commander Bell, says, no, he's in here all the time. He used to be with a normal girl. What was her name? It was like April or maybe May. What was her? What happened to her? Nick picks up on what Janine's trying to do, and he says, yeah, she got reassigned. She's fine. A little while later, he meets up with June, and he asks her, why are you dressed like a Martha? And she tells him, I'll explain in the car. Come on, let's go. But he stops her and says, Rose and her father are headed to D.C. I have the house for the whole night. Maybe you stay with me and go in the morning? June agrees that sounds like a better plan. It's probably safer. Well, June and Nick drive over to his place. Back at Jezebel's, Janine is done with Commander Bell, and she goes to the place where all the girls get ready, and there's Aunt Lydia. Happy as can be. She baked them cookies, and she can't wait to give them the good news. That New Bethlehem, they're going to propose that these girls work in a birthing center. She feels like this will be a much better option for the girls, but Janine doesn't want her help, and they get into an argument. It basically ends with Janine telling her, if you want my help, get my daughter back, the daughter that you stole from me and gave to a commander. Obviously, Aunt Lydia can't do that. She's not about to do that. At one point, the argument actually gets physical, but Aunt Lydia leaves, Janine screams, and nothing's really solved. As for June and Nick, they have an issue. Because when Nick arrives back at his place, he sees that Commander Wharton is actually still there. He's not supposed to be. This is throwing a wrench in everything, and Nick tells June, stay in the car for about 5 minutes, and if I'm not back, then go to Serena's. That's really surprising to June. She had no idea Serena was back in town. But Nick assures her, you can trust her, she'll help you. So June waits. She waits about 5 minutes, Nick still isn't back, and she decides to trek on over to Serena's, and when she knocks on the door, Serena is shocked. I mean, not only is she seeing June for the first time in a while since that train, but she's seeing her dressed as a Martha. None of it really makes sense. When Serena asks June what the hell she's doing there, June can't exactly give the same answer she gave Commander Lawrence. So she tells Serena, I showed up to ask Nick if he would come and live with me in Alaska, be a family with our daughter. But he said he wouldn't. I didn't know where else to go, and I needed somebody I could trust. The conversation then gets into exactly what happened in the train, their last meeting, and Serena actually thanks June, acknowledging that she was about to be torn apart by an angry mob. June saved her. Even though she appreciates what June did for her, she's not off her high horse, and she gets the conversation back to June's fake request of Nick to join her in Alaska, mentioning how Nick has all these responsibilities, his wife is due in a couple weeks, and June's request for Nick to live in Alaska is pretty selfish. That then sparks a pissing contest between both women. And June tells her, look, I just need a place to stay until Nick can get me over the border. Nobody saw me. Gilead thinks I'm in Alaska, and by the way, you owe me. Serena knows that this is the case, so she goes and she prepares a bed for June. But then she gives her the good news that she's getting married. Not only is she getting married, she's getting married to Nick's future father-in-law, which is going to make Serena Nick's future mother-in-law, kind of. June does try to warn Serena that this act that Commander Wharton is putting on might just be that. It might just be an act. Because Fred wasn't always this evil person when Serena knew him. And if we're comparing Fred and Commander Wharton, yeah, Commander Wharton looks great, but it's compared to what Serena remembered of the last few years with Fred. June actually shakes her head and says, I really thought you wanted to change. You're still subjugating yourself to a powerful man. You're still going to work for Gilead. Serena points out that New Bethlehem is not Gilead, but June points out that just because women are allowed to read there doesn't mean they're free. This is just another version of Gilead that's better for Serena. Serena, who is sick of this, tells her, if you really believe that, then shooting your mouth off to the one person here who's helping you is pretty foolish. She also throws it back at June, saying, who are you to judge? I mean, you're here to cheat on your husband and break up a marriage? The argument between these two then sparks back up. June pointing out all the good things she's done for Serena, and Serena yelling, yet you can't forgive me, with June reminding her, I'm never going to be able to forgive you. It ends with neither woman finding a resolution, and they just end up going to bed. The next morning, though, there is a goodwill gesture made by Serena. She invites Rita over. She did so covertly, but she figured that June would want to talk to Rita and they'd be able to catch up. As the three women sit down, Serena actually asks Rita if she'd be willing to make the wedding cake for her upcoming wedding. But this wouldn't just be as like a Martha situation. She would be invited to the wedding. She'd be an honored guest. When Serena, though, gets up to go feed her baby, it allows June and Rita to actually talk about why June is there, i.e. Mayday. June does ask Rita, since you're here, we could use your help. But Rita gives her a look like, yeah, that ain't happening. She tells her, I'm here to protect my family. June understands, and she's thrilled that Rita was able to find her sister and reconnect. Once Rita leaves, June is just kind of sitting in Serena's place waiting for Nick to show up. She does find a diary of Serena's where Serena is talking about the positives of the handmaid situation, which pisses June off because after all, Serena wasn't a handmaid, she wasn't raped. But before she can read more than a page, Nick runs in and tells her, I want to come with you. I have everything. I have the fake passports, the documents. I want to go to Alaska. The two passionately kiss, which, once again, June, stop cheating, girl. You got a husband. This isn't a throuple situation. But the little reunion is broken up when they hear a knock at the door. A knock they weren't expecting. And the knock is Commander Wharton. Serena comes downstairs. She sees both June and Nick. She tells them, you guys got to hide. And then she goes to let Commander Wharton in. And Commander Wharton is in a great mood. As June listens from a closet, she overhears Commander Wharton say that he was able to find out about a plan to massacre a bunch of commanders at Jezebel's. But then the dagger gets shoved in June's heart when she finds out that it was Nick who told Commander Wharton about this. Nick was kind of forced to, though. When he entered the house, Commander Wharton was waiting for him. Commander Wharton had heard that he was at Jezebel's, which came as a big surprise to Commander Wharton. He wanted to know if Nick was cheating on his daughter, and Nick said, "No, I'm not." But everything with Nick lately has been fishy. Commander Wharton knows that Nick was the last person to visit the eye who was clinging to life, the eye who then suddenly died. Nick also didn't have a really good excuse as to why he was in Jezebel's. So when Commander Wharton said, "You better tell me some information," Nick decided, well, I'll tell about the Mayday plan, I'll grab June, and I'll go to Alaska. But obviously, he didn't quite get away with it. In episode 7, June is stunned, standing in the closet and listening to Commander Wharton tell Serena all about how Nick essentially betrayed not only June, but the girls at Jezebel's. And once Serena and Commander Wharton leave to go for a walk, it allows June and Nick to leave the closet, and she's still reeling from the news. And Nick tries to explain himself. He tells June that he had no idea what Commander Wharton was going to do. He definitely didn't think he was going to do that. And that is kill all the girls in Jezebel's. Commander Wharton never approved of Jezebel's in the first place, so this kind of gave him an option to end up punishing the girls. But as Nick tells June, I never mentioned the girls at all. He just assumed that they were the ones who were planning the attack. He also tells June that her friend, i.e. Janine, was taken, and he's going to try to find out where she was taken to. But it doesn't seem like June even hears that. It doesn't seem like June hears much. Because every time Nick talks, all she thinks of is the fact that she was lied to and betrayed by this man that she was ready to run off with. At this point, all she wants to do is get over the border and reunite with Mayday. And she has Nick drive her. And while Nick wants to drive her all the way, she says, "No, I'm not doing that. Stop the car." And she essentially gets out before Nick can even stop the vehicle. And Nick chases after her, realizing that this might be the last time they talk. He tries to explain himself. But in reality, what he ends up doing is defending himself and defending his actions. Telling June, you knew I was a commander, and you knew I was an eye, and you had no problem with me making decisions before if it benefited you. But now, all of a sudden, you have a problem. Like when I shot 2 eyes, one of them being a 19-year-old kid, to save you, your friend, and your husband. And you had no problem with that, but all of a sudden now you have a problem with how I conduct myself? June looks at him disgusted and says, "You gave up those women to save yourself." And Nick shoots back, "Yeah, we all want to save ourselves. We're human. That's pretty normal." And when she tells him, "You're just like them," he responds with, "Yeah, and you love me, so what does that say about you?" And that seems to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. June walks over the border, never looking back as Nick tries to get her attention, tries to get her to come back and talk about it. She wants nothing to do with it. A little while later, she returns at the Mayday HQ, and the first person she sees is Luke. And Luke's relieved to have her back. And one of the first things he says is, "We're trying to figure out how exactly this happened," i.e., how the girls in Jezebel's were all murdered, and the commanders found out about their plan. And that's when she has to tell him, well, it was Nick. He betrayed us. She tells Luke that she really thought she could trust Nick. And that's when all the pent-up frustration about this throuple situation comes pouring out of Luke. He yells at his wife, "You thought you could trust him? He's a commander. The only thing he ever cared about was you. He didn't care about helping us, helping the cause. He cared about you and you only. And you ran around like he was a hero, like he was a savior. One that you've been pining for ever since you got back. What, you didn't think I noticed?" June, who is crying at this point, says, "I don't know what to do." And Luke says something that I think we all can agree on, maybe the most poignant thing he's said in 7 seasons. He tells her, "Don't be in love with a Nazi." So now Mayday has to go back and try to figure out exactly how they're going to fix this whole situation. June, meanwhile, is busy beating herself up over it because she blames herself not only for the fact that the girls were murdered in Jezebel's, but the fact that the plan was destroyed because she trusted the wrong person. The one person, though, that is not going to beat her up over this is Moira. Moira is her friend. She does talk to her, and through the conversation, she ends up making June feel better about all of it. Basically saying that it was understandable she trusted Nick. He gave her no reason not to trust him. But as for Nick, he is taking all of this pretty hard. When he gets back home, he just wants to be left alone, to drink and kind of wallow in self-pity when he gets a visitor, and it's Rita. Rita stopped by just to make sure that June got over the border okay, having no idea about anything that happened between June and Nick. And unfortunately for Rita, she ends up getting Nick's attitude. Initially, Rita thinks that Nick has this attitude because of the fact that he just said goodbye to June. So when Rita says, I'm sure you'll see each other again, Nick says, no, I'm not so sure. Yeah, that ain't happening. And when Rita points out that he's a great guy and they were friends before all of this, Nick says, no, we weren't friends. I mean, we were scared of each other. I was scared of you. You were scared of me. We would have turned on each other at the drop of a hat. Rita says, yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe before we knew each other, but not now. And Nick turns to her and says, you're just saying that because you want me to get your family out. At this point, Rita's kind of frustrated, and she asks him, don't you want to be a man who wants to do the right thing? But Nick tells her, I don't get to do what I want. When a frustrated Rita says, I was counting on you, Nick turns around and tells her, this is Gilead. The only person you should count on is yourself. This is all taking place in New Bethlehem, and the next day is a pretty busy day for the women of New Bethlehem. Most of the commander's wives all throw a bridal shower for Serena. And at first, it ends up being a really, really nice event. Serena's really appreciative, but pretty quickly the conversation gets to New Bethlehem and the reforms, with a lot of the women pointing out that their husbands aren't a fan of the reforms. And when a few of them keep harping on what their husbands think, Serena finally asks them, what do you think? I mean, not your husband. What do you think of the reforms? What are your hopes and dreams for Gilead? None of the women have an answer, so Serena tells all of them how she's going to start a fertility clinic in New Bethlehem. There won't be any handmaids in New Bethlehem unless they want to work in the fertility center. And most of the women say, yeah, that ain't going to work. I mean, no one's going to want those women around. I mean, thanks for the child, but kick rocks. And Serena asks them, where are they going to, though? And it's becoming clear to Serena that the women don't care. The women don't care what happens to the handmaids. They're willing to just let that be their husband's issue. Because the fact is, the women agree with their husband. They think that the current model is a good one. It doesn't need to change. And they're fine with the way things are. They're not interested in reform. And that is super frustrating to Serena. So when she gets home after the shower, she's still fuming about it. And when Commander Wharton walks up to talk to her about where they're going to live, she brings up the fact that the women at the party were just so condescending over the reforms. They just didn't seem like they wanted to listen. Commander Wharton tells her that they're going to have to listen because she's about to be Mrs. Wharton. And that's when they decide to just change up their entire wedding, to have a giant Gilead wedding in Boston, to basically be the center of attention so that no one can ignore them. He brings up inviting everybody, the commanders, their wives, the Marthas, and the handmaids. And that's pretty surprising to Serena because she wants to be done with the handmaids. But as Commander Wharton points out, it wouldn't be a traditional Gilead wedding if they weren't there. I mean, they are a part of the community. And Serena seems on board. Now it's just a matter of planning her dream wedding, where she will, in fact, be the center of attention. Now, one of the people that's going to be invited to this wedding is Aunt Lydia. And other than Serena, she does seem like the other woman in New Bethlehem that actually cares about what happens with the handmaids once they're done giving birth. But she was mortified to see what happened at Jezebel's. I mean, she really looked at those girls as her own, and she took some responsibility for what happened to them. But she is relieved to find out through one of the other aunts that Janine was saved by Commander Bell. Right before all the girls were murdered, Commander Bell gave the order to save Janine, and he then demanded that Janine be his personal handmaid. For Aunt Lydia, she thinks this is great news. She thinks that God had answered her prayers, when in reality, it's the worst thing that probably could have happened to Janine. Shortly after finding this out, Aunt Lydia goes to drop off a suitcase at Commander Bell's and check in on Janine and how she's doing, but Commander Bell is super quick with her. When Aunt Lydia wants to come in and check on Janine, he says no. When Aunt Lydia brings up the fact that, well, I'll just see her at the wedding, because after all, the handmaids will be invited, Commander Bell says, nah, she won't be there. Yeah, this one's a firecracker, and she's getting used to how we do things. Overall, the conversation is very quick, and that's because Commander Bell wants it that way. And it's super confusing to Aunt Lydia. It's just shady. And as she's leaving the property, she looks up in one of the windows, and she sees Janine. and Janine's face is all battered and bruised up. She's been beaten pretty badly. And it's at that moment that Aunt Lydia realizes exactly why Janine won't be attending the wedding, and she's pretty mortified. Back over with Mayday, though, Janine's former employer / commander, Commander Lawrence, has decided to switch teams and join the resistance. He shows up in a car with Mark, and immediately the head of Mayday starts ripping into Commander Lawrence, saying, we should kill you after all the things you've done, which Commander Lawrence laughs at and says, yeah, good luck. I mean, I've actually helped you guys out a lot, and nobody wants those guys dead more than me. So let's go inside and formulate a plan. But before he does that, he wants to talk to June. June was packing up. She was ready to head back to Alaska. She had made up with Luke because, well, of course, those two crazy lovebirds, they can't stay away from each other, and they can't stay mad at each other long. But still, for June, she felt like the damage was done. She felt like she wasn't helping, so she was just going to head back, be with her mother, be with Holly, and hopefully wait for Luke to show up. And for Commander Lawrence, that isn't the June Osborne that he knows. It doesn't help about the fact that he starts out the conversation bringing up Nick and how he can't believe she actually trusted him. He was always pretty selective about the information that he gave Nick, but he feels like this was a pretty big mess up by June. So he knows why she's upset. He knows why she's willing to leave. He just can't believe she's actually doing it. Right before she leaves, he asks her, where are you going to be when Serena becomes Queen of Gilead? When that wedding is broadcast all around the world and Serena is surrounded by handmaids and commanders' wives and all of that, that's going to sit well with you? You're going to be okay with that? That's the way June Osborne's last chapter in Gilead ends? And she tells him, my last chapter ended when those women died. But Commander Lawrence says, Janine's not dead. Yeah, that pervert, Commander Bell, he saved her, quote unquote, and he made her his handmaid. And the fact that Janine is still alive and the fact that Janine is still in danger gets June to stop in her tracks and turn around. But it also gives her the idea on how Mayday is going to kill those commanders. The key is the handmaids. Commander Lawrence and June get the head of Mayday all together, and they tell them June's plan. It's to attack at the wedding. June knows that Serena is going to invite everybody that's important. And the fact that they're at a wedding, and the fact that they just had a big win with the bus at Jezebel's, they're going to be relaxed. They're going to let their guard down. This is the perfect opportunity to strike. Also, the fact that the attack is coming from handmaids, no one's going to suspect that. All those handmaids at this wedding, one giant group, anonymous, veiled, trained not to talk. It's the perfect cover. So the plan is for June and Moira to be smuggled back into Gilead by Commander Lawrence. He's going to drive them to the Red Center where all the handmaids are. The girls are going to get out and they're going to smuggle weapons to all of the handmaids. Then they just have to wait for the wedding and then they attack. Oh, and the bombs that Luke drove in, they're still in place, so you can set those things off, and it'll create panic and confusion in the streets. That's when Mark's military swoops in and does damage. But that's not enough. No, they're going to use everybody that they can, every friend that they have, every ally who hates Gilead, they're going to use them to their advantage. One of them being Rita, who has been commissioned by Serena to make the cake. Commander Lawrence gets some poison from Mark. He delivers it to Rita. She puts it in the cake batter, and that should take care of some of the beefed up security that Serena is going to order for the wedding. No one can think of a better option, and this one's pretty good. So later that night, Commander Lawrence drives both Moira and June, who are snuggled in his trunk, to the Red Center. He gets out, and he tells the one person that they need to get rid of, Aunt Lydia, he tells her, hey, I'm going to need you to go to Washington, D.C. tonight to pitch your whole handmaids doing things after their retirement and having a purpose. And she doesn't want to go, but he insists. This is your one opportunity. You have to go. And since he's a high commander, she can't say no to it. While he is convincing Aunt Lydia to get on that plane, the girls are smuggled in by one of the aunts. The aunt that told Aunt Lydia about Janine's relocation to Commander Bell's. That aunt is on board. She takes both June and Moira down to the basement of the Red Center where they can hide, and she tells them that everybody's on board. The handmaids, the Marthas, everybody. But there is one person that doesn't know about the plan, and that's Janine. The aunt tells June that Commander Bell won't let Janine come to the wedding, so she's in the dark with all this. But June says, no, I'll take care of it. We can't abandon Janine, and we certainly can't let Commander Bell off the hook, so I'll figure out a way to get her that information. Everything seems to be going good. The aunt heads upstairs. She is almost caught by Aunt Lydia, but the nervous energy is starting to hit Moira, and she asks June to say some leadership stuff. And June decides to say a prayer, where she ends it with, and may God help us kill all those motherfuckers. In episode 8, it is the day of the wedding, and I got the plans a little bit confused before. The plan is for all the handmaids to go to the wedding. There will be one handmaid, and we think it's June, who's designated with basically carrying all of the knives. The knives will be handed out during the ceremony at the church. Just about everybody at the wedding will be drugged up thanks to the cake that Rita is making. About 2 hours after they get home from the ceremony, they're going to be knocked out, and that's going to allow the handmaids to extract vengeance, taking those knives and plunging them into the commanders who have been raping them this entire time. And early on, it's going according to plan. The handmaids all arrive at the church. They take their seats. The respected commanders also arrive. Gabriel shows up because, it's his wedding. And then Serena shows up with a dress that even the Holy Spirit would say, girl, show some skin. With Nick up at the pulpit giving a speech about God and crap like that, one by one the handmaids start passing down the knives to their neighbor so that all of them are armed. They do actually have a little bit of a scare at one point when one of the girls drops the knife and makes a loud clank on the ground, and suddenly they've got a couple of eyes on them. That's when June decides to pivot and say, you know what, we're just going to hand these out at the actual reception, and again, no one's going to notice because we're handmaids. And that's basically what happens when they get to the reception. The handmaids arrive, but they're put into a corner, and no one's paying them much attention at all, so they're easily able to hand out the rest of the knives to the girls that don't have one. No, this particular day, all eyes are on Gabriel and Serena as they enter the room. They have their first dance, and it's not long before all the commanders are on the dance floor, unaware of the fact that that'll be the last dance they ever have. Shortly after this dance, though, Serena goes up to Joseph and reminds him that they're on the same side. And just because she became the new Mrs. Wharton doesn't mean she's abandoned her ideas for Gilead and New Bethlehem. She still wants to be progressive. She still wants to make this a good community for women, and she still wants to bring reform. And you can kind of tell that Lawrence doesn't really buy it. But then again, maybe I'm reading Lawrence's mood wrong because he knows that, well, he's about to become the most powerful man in Gilead. After talking with Joseph, she decides to go address all of the handmaids. That was something that neither Moira or June was expecting, so when Serena comes over, they head to the back. They don't want to be caught. And Serena came over with good intentions. She didn't have to do it, but she addresses all the handmaids. She lets them know that she's aware they are people. And they're very special people, but they're people nonetheless. She then starts telling a story about the handmaid that she once had, and that gets June's ears to perk up. She tells all the girls that this particular handmaid was difficult, and she wasn't very nice to the handmaid, and the handmaid wasn't really nice to her, but after a while, they kind of became equals. And now she actually counts her as a good friend. And if you haven't picked up on it, she's talking about June. She goes on to tell the girls that while it wasn't easy to repair their relationship, she does believe that her former handmaid forgives her, which is in question. The speech, however, does get interrupted by Rita, who walks over, where Serena tells her, you actually could speak on forgiveness. What are your ideas on it? To which Rita tells the group, yeah, set a goal and, work towards it. The reason, though, that Rita walked over wasn't to address the handmaids. It was because she brought the cake. And now it's time for everybody to, enjoy the cake. And the cake is huge. It's gorgeous. They start cutting it up. And everybody does what you do at a wedding. They start eating cake. There's only a select group that aren't eating the cake. Like Commander Lawrence, he knows the plan, so he's not eating it. In fact, he's actually imploring Naomi to eat more of it. And while all the handmaids were given pieces of cake, none of them touch it. No, they just leave it on the plate, and most of them stick it under the table that they were at because it's covered by a tablecloth. So theoretically, no one should notice it. And again, because they're handmaids, nobody really notices that they're not eating it. But for June and her group, this is a great sign because it means their plan is working. But the handmaids are the first ones to leave the wedding. They get up. They're about to go their separate ways, some going back to the Red Center, some heading back to the home that they were coming from. And as June goes to leave, she has to stop in her tracks because there's somebody that has shown up late at the wedding that she was not expecting, and that is Aunt Lydia. Luckily for June, Aunt Lydia is in the middle of a conversation with Serena, who is welcoming her to the wedding. She's thrilled that she could make it. And June has to quickly turn around and go in the opposite direction. But she was seen by Aunt Lydia. And Aunt Lydia can't 100% confirm that it was June, but she's pretty damn sure. So she starts chasing after this handmaid, saying, June, June, June. And finally, when she catches up to who she thinks June is and turns her around, she's startled to find out that it's not June at all. It's some other handmaid. And June was able to slip out and get away from her. Aunt Lydia's arrival wasn't just startling to June, it's also startling to the other aunt who is in on the plan and helping June and her friends, and also Commander Lawrence, who's pissed off because he clearly sent her to D.C. and she disregarded it. Aunt Lydia doesn't really want to talk about the D.C. thing because she's so fixated on the fact that she's convinced June Osborne is there. And that's when the aunt and Commander Lawrence just gaslight her. They tell her that's ridiculous. June Osborne's in Alaska. You're tired. You're old. Why don't you go get some food in you? It'll do you some good. They basically treat her like we treat my pop-pop, who's in a home. Aunt Lydia kind of does what she's told. She thinks about it. It is a little ridiculous that June would be able to be in Gilead at that moment, so she goes and gets food. But she actually notices the cake. Right before she eats it, she looks on the ground and she sees that someone had left their cake there. And when she asks one of the waiters who was sitting over there, and he says the handmaids, she goes to investigate, and when she lifts up the tablecloth, she sees all the cake, and she knows something is going on. She leaves the wedding, she was the last guest anyway, and she heads to the Red Center. But at this point, Gabriel and Serena have made their way home. It's the first time that Serena's going to be in her new home, and she's walked over the threshold by her new husband. Everything's good. They're both happy. But this is the quickest honeymoon period in the world. Because Serena's entire mood changes when she looks into her spare room and she sees that Gabriel has provided a handmaid. And Serena's mortified. She reminds Gabriel, I'm fertile. I can have kids. But he tells her, I know that, and we'll try, don't get me wrong, but we want to have a big family, and she's a vessel. But Serena gets really pissed off at that phrase. Vessel. She fights back on it and says she's not a vessel, she's a person. And Serena goes so far as to walk over to this particular handmaid and say, what is your name? But when the handmaid says of Gabriel, Serena tells her, no, what is your actual name? And the girl reluctantly tells her it's Christina. To which Serena says, get out of this house and don't ever come back. But Commander Wharton isn't about to let that happen. After all, we have a prime fertile handmaid in front of us, right? You can't let that go. So he sends the handmaid to her room, and then these two get into a big, big fight, where you see Gabriel's teeth, if you will. He gets super angry. He screams at Serena that he's entertained her liberal ideas, but enough's enough. He's not going to turn away towards God. And Serena at this point can't believe she was so dense and naive to think that Gabriel was any different than Fred or any of the other commanders. She immediately is regretting the wedding. And when he says, I won't turn my back on God, she screams at him, oh, you think God wants this abomination of a marriage? It gets so bad that Serena grabs her son and goes to leave. She doesn't want to stay anywhere near this guy. And at first, Gabriel tells his guard, don't let her leave. Then addressing her and telling Serena, you're my wife, your place is in this house, you have nowhere to go, and you are under my... But he stops himself. Serena, however, finishes it by saying, under your what? Under your rule? What are you going to do? Cut off my finger? Beat me with a belt? Because all of that's happened before, and I'm still here. I've survived all of it, and I will survive you. He shakes his head and says, I'm not something to survive. I'm a good man. I'm a good husband. And she says, you can't be. You're a commander. That line stings, but he does tell his guard to stand down and let Serena leave, and she does. No idea where she's going. Meanwhile, over at the Red Center, Aunt Lydia has shown up. She knows that something's going on. Some of the guards are actually knocked out from the cake. And when she sees the aunt that was helping the girls out, she tells her something's going on. I got to go check on the girls. But the aunt tries to distract her, saying, oh, no, they're fine. They're sleeping. But Aunt Lydia is a pit bull. She's a woman on a mission, and she heads right for the girls' dormitory. At this point, that helpful aunt, who according to IMDb is named Aunt Phoebe, realizes she has to do something. So she takes out a knife, and she's ready to take out Aunt Lydia. But there's one guard that isn't knocked out. He's still breathing, and because of that, she can't attack Aunt Lydia. She has to, unfortunately, fumble with the lock and let Aunt Lydia in. The good news is there are girls in there. The bad news is Aunt Lydia doesn't believe that they're sleeping, and when she goes to check further, she rips one of the sheets off, and she notices that the girls are still all dressed because they were waiting for the order that they could attack. So Aunt Lydia is able to confirm that something is in fact going on. And she, quote-unquote, wakes up all the handmaids. She gets them all together. She gets that guard to hold Aunt Phoebe at gunpoint, and she starts grilling her on what exactly is going on. And one of the girls that is witnessing this is Moira. As Aunt Lydia gets more and more agitated and angry, Aunt Phoebe getting more and more scared, finally Moira stands up and says, get away from her. And Aunt Lydia is taken aback. I mean, here's a handmaid standing up to her. But the thing is, Aunt Lydia doesn't recognize Moira. And when Aunt Lydia asks, what's your name? Moira's appalled. She can't believe that Aunt Lydia doesn't remember her, but then she says, what does it matter what my name is? You took that from me. No, but I'll tell you. My name is Moira. And that's when it clicks with Aunt Lydia that Moira must be working with June. So she starts grilling Moira on where June Osborne is, but Moira's playing dumb. Because the reality is she doesn't know where June is at the moment. But Aunt Lydia persists, asking her, where is June Osborne? And finally she hears a voice from behind her say, I'm right here. Because June had arrived back at the Red Center. She went on a little field trip after the wedding to go get Janine. She showed up at Commander Bell's home. She let herself in. Commander Bell initially was knocked out, but he got a phone call. It woke him up. Whatever news he got on the other line was surprising to him. But then June kind of announced her presence and stabbed him in the face, killing him. Janine was thrilled to see her savior in June, and the two headed back to the Red Center. So June shows up at the Red Center just in the nick of time, because Aunt Lydia was losing her patience, and it was looking like she was about to make Aunt Phoebe an example. But June, however, doesn't take this opportunity to attack Aunt Lydia, to yell at Aunt Lydia. No, in fact, she's very, very calm in her approach. Essentially, her message to Aunt Lydia is, I didn't do this, you did. Because you took our name, you took our freedom, you took our children, and then you sent us off to get raped. And deep down, you know that that is not right, that God doesn't want that. Yet, you did it anyway. So what you need to do now is be a good person and let us go. And while that message doesn't really get through to Aunt Lydia, Janine's message does. Because as soon as Aunt Lydia sees Janine, it completely changes her. Janine telling Aunt Lydia, yeah, they beat me, but then basically forgiving her. Aunt Lydia at that moment realizing that maybe while she had good intentions, she did put, quote unquote, her girls in danger. Lots of danger. So she has the guard put his gun down, and as Janine gives Aunt Lydia a big hug, all the girls leave. Even June kind of gives Aunt Lydia a nod right before she heads out the door. As these handmaids pour out into the street, June Osborne now has an army with the knowledge that all over New Bethlehem, there are other handmaids who are plunging daggers into commanders and killing them. In episode 9, Serena is running with Noah in the streets of Boston, having no idea where exactly to go as she starts hearing bombs going off in the distance, and she gets scared. She gets even more terrified when she overhears a commotion and she sees a handmaid killing a wife. Serena's not sure what exactly is going on, but she is scared. She heads to the one person she knows that can probably protect her, and that is Joseph Lawrence, who knows exactly what is going on. She knocks on the door, and immediately Joseph lets her in. And Naomi, who is woken up at this point, has a ton of questions, i.e., why aren't you with your husband? And Serena tells her, I left him tonight, which comes as a big surprise to Naomi, but Serena didn't come here to talk to Naomi. Serena came here to talk to Joseph. She starts explaining about the bombs and the murder that she witnessed, and Joseph just says, yeah, it's not safe right now. There's a rebellion going on. And boy, is there ever a rebellion going on. June, Moira, the rest of the handmaids, they all get into a truck, and the plan is to get most of those handmaids to the border so they could cross over to Canada and be free. As for June and Moira, though, they're sticking around. They're going to continue the fight. And that's a big surprise to Janine, but she decides, you know what, I'm sticking around too. Because my daughter's here, and I want to be with my daughter. The other person that is with them is Aunt Phoebe, who tells June, I'm Ava. That's her real name. And so far, the plan is going great. They just have to make one final stop. But that's when the plan unravels. Because as they're waiting for more handmaids to join them at this stop, they get caught by the eyes. They bring out all of the handmaids, they line them up against the wall, and it looks like they're going to shoot them and kill them all, but they don't. They simply say, where is June Osborne? And it takes a lot, but finally June comes forward and says, I'm here. She wasn't about to let them kill somebody in her name, so she stepped forward. And for the time being, it saves everybody, but they take June into custody. The next day, June and the rest of the handmaids are going to be sentenced to death. They're going to hang for what they did. And as the girls wait for their fate, the man who will be the executioner, Commander Wharton, has to go make good with his wife. Serena wakes up in the Lawrence household that day, and she gets a talking to from Naomi, who can't understand exactly why the handmaids rebelled. And Serena can't understand how Naomi can't understand. But eventually, Naomi just gets tired of hearing it and says, you know what, I'm tired of your liberal ways. You have to make good with your husband. And when Serena says, I don't know if I can, she tells her, well, you better, because he's here. And moments later, in walks Commander Wharton, talking to Commander Lawrence about how they need to figure out exactly what to do about these rebels to nip this in the bud. All the while, Commander Lawrence is playing dumb, acting like, yeah, okay, no, you're right, totally. As if he doesn't want the rebels to win. When Commander Wharton, though, sees Serena, he immediately starts apologizing for the night before. He apologizes for how he handled the situation, and she tells him it doesn't matter. I mean, you ruined your vows the moment you brought a handmaid in. So he decides to change. He tells her that he still wants to try to have a family with her, but he's going to do it without handmaids. He's going to appease to what she wants. And when she asks him, well, what happens if we can't have a family without handmaids? He gives some song and dance, biblical stuff. She seems to accept it, and all of a sudden, she's back on board as Mrs. Wharton. They then, however, get into what happened with all the commanders. He tells her how it was June Osborne who was behind drugging their wedding guests via the cake. In order to figure out exactly what they're going to do about this rebellion, though, he also tells her, I'm leaving for D.C. tonight via a plane at 7 p.m. with the other commanders. Before I leave, though, I have to go hang these women. And your friend, June, is going to be one of them. Justice will be served. And then he leaves. He leaves to go talk with June, who is in custody. One of the first questions she asks him is, okay, who figured it out? I mean, was it the wife? Was it the bride? Did she figure it out? But Commander Wharton says no. I'll tell you right now, though, she was betrayed. And he never does quite reveal exactly how he knew it was June Osborne behind all of it. But these two get into a disagreement with no real resolution. Commander Wharton lecturing her about how she turned her back on God and how God is disappointed, and June questioning how exactly he knows what God wants, what he thinks. The conversation is going nowhere. Commander Wharton tells her, the only reason I came here was to have you settle up with God, and that's only because my wife would want it that way. But June shakes her head and says, no, the God that I know, the God that Serena knows, she wouldn't want this. That God wants love. So, Commander, choose love. Be the man that Serena thought she was marrying. Be compassionate. That is what God would want. But that's not what Commander Wharton wants. And after hearing this last-ditch plea from June, he just shrugs her to the side and walks out. Before the public hanging, Commander Wharton arranges for all the commander's wives and their children to be taken to a safe location. This is going to include Commander Lawrence and his quasi-daughter, Charlotte/Angela. Commander Lawrence, along with the rest of the commanders, are going to meet beforehand, before their trip to D.C., but before he goes off, he is able to say goodbye to Naomi. More so, he wants to make sure Naomi is prepared to be a mother. Because when it comes to the loving and compassionate parent, it is definitely Joseph Lawrence. He's the fun one. He entertains her. He shows her love. Whereas Naomi, she's cold. So Joseph makes sure that Naomi has the proper stuff, coloring books, paper, all of that to distract his daughter. And then he's able to say goodbye to Charlotte, telling her that he loves her. And as her and Naomi walk off, you truly see how much Joseph Lawrence loves this little girl. Naomi and Charlotte are going to join the other wives and children, but one person who is not willing to go is Serena. She's going to stay put. And once Naomi and Charlotte do leave, it leaves Joseph and Serena to have a conversation about what's going to happen with June. Serena especially feels guilty because she knows that she wouldn't be there, and more importantly, Noah wouldn't be there if it wasn't for June and what she did. She doesn't want to see June die. Even after what June did at her wedding, she doesn't want this. But unfortunately, both her and Joseph know it's too late. There's nothing they can do. So all they can do is pray. And that's what they do. And not too far away, most of Gilead is watching as June Osborne is brought in front of them. Commander Wharton starts making a speech about what she did, the righteousness, all of that crap. But then a surprising familiar face arrives to get hanged, and it's Aunt Lydia. And June didn't see that coming. Aunt Lydia is going to join June, Ava, and the rest of the handmaids. He gives Aunt Lydia a chance to rectify her mistakes and make peace with the Lord. And at first, it seems like she's doing that. She asks for forgiveness for her girls because they didn't know what they had done. After all, they were prisoners to wicked and godless men. And that's when Commander Wharton gives a signal to put a noose around her neck. He then, though, stupidly allows June to do the exact same thing. And she basically follows suit. I mean, she starts giving a bunch of biblical nonsense. It seems like she's remorseful, but she's not. And she ends her prayer with screaming, "Don't let the bastards grind you down," until she's hung up. But she is actually hung up. I mean, her little legs are dangling. She's probably only got a minute before she stops breathing, but she's saved. Because in that crowd of people were Luke, Rita, and the rest of Mayday. They brought weapons, and they were prepared to fight back, and that's exactly what they did. Luke chucked a couple of grenades. The members of Mayday rushed the stage. They took out the eyes, the security. They caught everybody off guard. And Rita was able to get June down before she died. As June lay on the floor trying to gather her thoughts, collect her breath, she's able to see 4 United States planes fly in and throw bombs on Boston. Boston is officially under attack. It's just like how they drew it up. Mark and his team swoop in. They start looking for commanders, but they're not able to find any because most of them went off to have this pre-flight meeting. And one of the places that Mark looked was Commander Lawrence's house, where he finds Serena. He asks Serena if she knows where Commander Lawrence is, but she doesn't. And he says, "Okay, come with me. I'll get you a safe place, and I'll leave men here just in case Joseph comes back." But either way, this is a big win for the United States. And they take a tiny foothold in the city of Boston. And even though she almost died, it's not too long before June Osborne is joining Mark in HQ to find out what the next steps are. But she gets a surprise. Turns out Ava was pretending to be an aunt the entire time. She's actually CIA. Both Ava and Mark start debriefing June on exactly what is going on, but they do have an issue. They don't know where the other commanders are. The radical ones, the ones that they need to kill. And they know that if they don't kill them, they're going to lose. It's going to be another Chicago all over again. They're not going to win. They're not going to have a chance. June asks if they know where Joseph is, but Mark says, "No, we don't." And then June asks him, "Well, do you have anybody else that might know?" And Mark does. He tells her, yeah, Serena, she's across the street in protective custody. I think she knows more than she's letting on. And June knows if there's one person that can get Serena to talk, it might just be herself. So she heads over there. Initially, when she sits down, Serena is thrilled to see her alive. She never expected that. But it's not long before these two start another pissing contest about Gilead, throwing blame around. Although this argument is nipped in the bud pretty quickly because June knows she doesn't really have time for it, and she asks Serena, where are the commanders? But Serena plays dumb. She tells her, I don't know. I really don't. I can't tell you. And June asks her, you can't or you won't? And it's clear by Serena's face that the answer is she won't. June kind of shakes her head in disgust, telling her, I really thought you changed. I really did. But no, your words are hollow as usual. You haven't changed. And Serena takes exception to that. She tells her, no, I have changed. But what you're asking me to do? You're asking me to put a target on my husband's back. And June yells back at her, he is no different than the others. He might be worse. He's a tyrant. Do you realize he was going to string me up like I was nothing today? And that's the guy that you want Noah looking up to? That's the guy that you want raising Noah? That dude. That's the dude you're protecting right now? Come on, Serena. Get real. June pushes and pushes and pushes until finally she breaks through. She makes Serena realize that June's right. Commander Wharton is no different. In fact, he probably is worse. So that's when she gives up the information that the commanders are flying out to D.C. at 7 p.m. June rushes back over across the street to let Mark know, but at this point, they've been joined by Joseph, who went back home. He was greeted by American soldiers, and he was brought to HQ. Finding out where the commanders are / where they were headed, that's part one. Killing them, that's going to be part two, and that's where Joseph can come in handy. Mark tells them that what they need Joseph to do is go on the plane that the commanders will be using to get to D.C. and put a bomb on it, and then leave. The bomb is going to be triggered by altitude, so when the jet reaches a certain altitude, the thing's going to go off, boom, they're all dead. And initially, Commander Lawrence just completely scoffs at this idea. First of all, he wasn't planning on going to D.C., as he told both June and Mark, I was benched for my radical ideas. They don't want me going. Second of all, I'm not James Bond. But Mark pleads with him. He tells Lawrence that if those men arrive in D.C., then all of what they did was for naught. This is the only way. They can't shoot the plane out of the sky because of the air zone. They've seen what Gilead's anti-aircraft missiles will do. The only way to take care of these commanders is an inside job. With Commander Lawrence on the fence about what exactly to do, June steps up and says, I'll come with you. I'll be your getaway driver. And that gets Joseph to agree to it. So both Joseph and June head over to the airport, arriving before the other commanders and hopefully sticking the bomb on, getting off, and escaping. But they're unable to. That's because the other commanders show up early. It was something that Commander Lawrence certainly wasn't expecting. And initially, the commanders question what Lawrence is doing there. But it's actually Commander Wharton who steps up and says, no, this is good. We need a unified front. Joseph, I'm happy to have you aboard. I'll see you on the plane. And it's at this point that Commander Lawrence realizes he's never going to see his daughter again. Because the only way to execute the mission is by Commander Lawrence staying on that plane. It's going to look way too suspicious if he walks off. He does think about it for a second, but then he starts walking up the steps to the aircraft. The last thing he does before he enters the plane is look over at June, who is hiding in the corner at this point. He kind of gives her a nod. He puts his hand on his heart, and then he heads in, knowing that he's heading to his death. But Commander Lawrence isn't the last commander on the plane. There's one more they're waiting for. It's new dad, Nick. Nick had been absent from all the meetings because Rose had gone into labor early thanks to complications via the cake. And it's because of the complications that Rose decided to use that to her advantage and reminds Nick, the woman that you're in love with did this. She put your baby at risk. So you need to choose. And it wasn't a hard decision for Nick. He decided to choose Gilead and God. When he first gets on the plane, he's congratulated by Commander Wharton and the other commanders on being a new dad. But then he sits next to Lawrence. He makes a snide comment about joining the winners, and Commander Lawrence says, yeah, I guess I had to do what I had to do. Nick, though, covertly asks him if June's okay. And Commander Lawrence says, you know her, can't keep a good woman down. And when Nick mentions how she tried to talk him out of all of this, tried to talk him into leaving, Commander Lawrence looks at him and says, you should have listened. As the plane is taking off, June is watching, mortified, knowing that the father of her baby and the man who had saved her so many times were probably minutes away from dying. And sure enough, she watches that plane go off in the distance, and boom, it explodes, killing all the commanders on board. And in the series finale, it is a big victory for Boston. It took about 2 weeks, but Gilead finally pulled their troops out. Boston is once again America. And there are plans to expand this. This isn't going to stop. They're going to go to New York. They're going to go to Ohio. And then hopefully they make their way all the way to Colorado, where Hannah is. Boston is finally free. American flags are once again waving. And while sure, it's not perfect and there's still a lot of work to do, it's certainly better than it was. A lot of the people of Boston congregate in one particular part and they start a bonfire, burning all Gilead trinkets and items. And that includes June, Rita, and Moira. But as this fire is going up, June just can't help but reminisce on all that she's been through to get to this point, to get to a free Boston. One of the people that's actually been instrumental in the rebellion has shockingly been Luke. And after the little celebration, June meets up with him and he tells her there are still big plans to be done. He's found some union workers and they're going to go down and turn the power back on with the power plant. And then the next hope is getting the airport back together. And if they do that, then planes can arrive from Alaska. They can get Holly and June's mom and reunite the family, but also reunite a bunch of families by doing this. He tells her after all that's done, he's planning on heading to New York to liberate that state. But for June, her only focus is Colorado because of Hannah. And it's Luke who reminds her the way to get to Hannah is by taking down Gilead one by one. The next day, though, she gets some good news regarding Hannah. She goes to headquarters of where the American army is kind of held up, and she meets with Mark. And Mark tells her there's been a big shift in the Gilead regime, and that the people that have been raising Hannah are heading back to D.C. Now, it's not ideal, but it's 2,000 miles closer than where she previously was, so this is a win. While June is thrilled about this, no doubt, there is another concern. Janine. Janine was left behind enemy lines. She's still in Gilead custody, and she's really concerned about her. And Mark tells her that there is a list of people that are still in custody from Gilead. They're behind enemy lines, and they don't know many details about them. One of those people is Janine. Mark doesn't even know if she's alive, but he's hopeful to get some more information, and they can hopefully get her back. Another one of those people that was taken back to Gilead was Aunt Lydia. And June can't believe that Aunt Lydia once again survived, but yeah, no, she did. She's a survivor, and she's actually trying to help the Americans free Janine. Because after all, Janine's one of her girls. Towards the end of the conversation, June mentions that Mark should really get some sleep because he looks horrible. And Mark looks at her and says, I don't sleep well because my ex-wife and my son are in Hawaii. And anytime I close my eyes, I envision them. And I just get back to work because I want to take down Gilead so that my son doesn't have to. And that's something that June can definitely respect. Mark has been a big help with June, but somebody who has also helped out is actually Serena. And after meeting with Mark, June goes and sees where they're holding Serena and Noah to really thank her because without Serena's information, they never would have been able to take down Boston. And even Serena mentions, yeah, I guess I had a hand in taking down Boston twice. She then, though, apologizes to June for what happened with Nick. I mean, she knows that June was a part of it, and June tries to brush it aside, saying Nick reaped what he sowed, but Serena knows that there was more to the relationship, much more. And she reminds June, if he had any choice, he would have went and been with you. To that, June doesn't say anything. She just kind of smirks and gives a nod. And then she starts helping Noah find some clothes because Serena doesn't have anything. While June is doing this, and she found him a Red Sox onesie that's perfect for him, Serena mentions how she really has nowhere to go. Gilead will never take her back. Canada doesn't want her. The EU won't issue her a passport. She is basically a woman with nothing. And that's when June reminds her, you're his mother. Just be that. And it comforts Serena. But then they get interrupted with Mark, who shows up and says, Serena, we gotta go. He's putting Serena and Noah on a bus to a refugee camp. It's not ideal, but it's the best he can do for the moment. Mark's going to do his best to take care of Serena. After all, she was important in this whole thing. And then June, who walked out with Mark and Serena, hands over Noah and goes to say goodbye. This will be the last time these two women ever see each other, you'd think. Serena knows this, so she tells her, hey, June, look, when I think back to the things that I did to you, I'm ashamed. And June says you should be. But you can really see it in her face that Serena is ashamed. And she feels horrible. And she tells June, look, if words mean anything, just know I am sorry. I really am truly sorry for what I did to you. And June forgives her. And it's as if a weight has been lifted off Serena's shoulders. She feels way better about the situation, and the two women say goodbye. It's worth mentioning that when Serena does finally arrive at that refugee camp, it's not great. In fact, they tell her, you're probably going to have to find another place tomorrow night. We're really not a great place for kids. We're not even supposed to have them. And Serena is just kind of happy to have a place to stay for her and her son, but she is concerned because she doesn't have things like clothes or diapers. And then she looks at a bag that June had given her, a bag full of things that she would need, like diapers, like wipes, and, well, like that onesie that she picked out. She remembers what June said about just being happy that you're his mother. And in that moment, Serena Joy is content with her life. As for June, her act of forgiveness didn't go unnoticed by Mark, who said, that was really nice of you to do that. And June told him, well, you got to start somewhere, right? He then hands her a card that is going to get her access to her old neighborhood. Just in case she wanted to do a trip down memory lane. But June is doing what a lot of people are doing in Boston. They're walking around and they're reminding themselves what it used to be. And as June is doing that, looking at a storefront, somebody comes up next to her and says, this used to be an ice cream shop and they had great salted caramel ice cream. And then June looks over and it's Emily. And she cannot believe it. I mean, she thought Emily was gone. No, Emily's here in the flesh in front of her. The woman take to the river walk as Emily tells June where she was. She wasn't too far away. She was in Bridgeport. She'd become a Martha, and she'd really befriended the commander. She considered the guy a friend. Thanks to the kindness of this commander, she was able to kind of patch up her relationship with Syl and even FaceTime Oliver. It was only for a minute, but it was everything she wanted. The conversation then goes to the fight, and June is visibly upset. She's annoyed about the fact that she still hasn't been reunited with Hannah. And at one point, she brings up the word impossible, and Emily says, I don't know about that. I mean, me and you were here to witness this, to witness a free Boston. That seemed pretty impossible. And that's when they reach the point of the Riverwalk where people like them, rebels, used to be strung up. And now, you've got 3 eyes who were strung up and killed. And the Riverwalk is emblazoned with graffiti of women who were handmaids that wrote their real name. It's inspiring and empowering. This kind of reminds June of one thing that she hasn't done yet. Get rid of that red dress, that red handmaid's dress. And that night, she heads to a fire in the street and she throws it in, closing that chapter of her life. And as she's walking back, the lights come on because Luke and the rest of Mayday, they've been able to get the power restored to Boston. June goes to bed happy that night, but she's woken up in the middle of the night by a soldier who says, you got to come with me, it's urgent. And June's pretty concerned. She's brought to a desolate road in the middle of nowhere, and there's Mark. And Mark apologizes for the late night, but he says, we needed an eyewitness. They've gone to that location because it's the new border between America and Gilead. And it's not long before June realizes why she was called here. 2 vans show up from the Gilead side, and they just discard a body. And that body is Janine. As June, though, is checking on her, making sure she's okay, 3 other people get out of the other van. And it's Naomi, Aunt Lydia, and Charlotte. And the reason they've shown up is because Naomi has decided to give Janine her child back. I mean, Naomi was never built to be a mother anyway, and she wasn't attached to Charlotte like Joseph Lawrence was attached to her, so this makes a lot of sense. But when Janine sees that she's getting her child back, it changes everything. I mean, she is elated. Her whole mood does a 180. And June looks at Naomi and thanks her. Naomi heads back to the van, and this gives June and Aunt Lydia their final goodbyes. Aunt Lydia tells June, "Take care of our Janine for me, will you?" And June says, "Yeah, of course." But then June thanks Aunt Lydia. Thanks her for all she did in this moment. Because she realized that Aunt Lydia had a choice. She took a big risk on doing what she did when she was put to the gallows, but she stood up for what was right. And June isn't going to forget that. And you can tell that when June called back to Aunt Lydia was concerned about what the message would be, but she's relieved when the message is simply, "Thank you." The next day, however, June is reunited with even more people that she loves. Because her mother and Holly have arrived from Alaska. For June, she's elated. She's reunited with her child, and when she gets a private moment, she hugs Holly, telling her how much she loves her, how much she cares about her, but unfortunately, she's going to have to leave her again. And she's going to have to leave her because it's the right thing to do, because the fight isn't over, because she has to go get her sister. It's an emotional moment for June as she hugs this child that clearly can't understand anything she's saying, but her mother is overhearing it. And June knows that. She's fine with it. But when she finally gets a one-on-one with her mom, she asks, "Is that okay that Holly stay with you longer?" Her mom asks, "How much longer? And how much longer are you to keep doing this?" And June explains to her mom, "Until the fight stops. We can't just beat Gilead. We have to destroy Gilead and make sure Gilead is never coming back. We didn't fight enough last time, and that's how we ended up with this problem." June goes on to point out that she learned how to fight from her mother protesting. And her mother really is just worried about who's going to keep June safe, but June points out we're not safe. We're not safe because Gilead is still a thing. This conversation, though, gets into June's insecurities and how she feels like at times she's not being a good mother because of the fact that she continues to leave her child. But her mom says, "You're a great mother, and I will remind her of everything that you do, of everything that you stand for, about how you saved so many lives." Well, then she thinks about it and she says, "June, you really should write down this story. Your story. The story of survival." And June tells her, "I just don't think it's a real good story. There's a lot of violence, there's sadness," but her mom tells her, "Don't write it for the people that didn't lose anybody. Write it for the people that are never going to get their child back. Write it for them. They need that story. Write it, June." But June still is unsure. The only thing she is sure about is she's going to Washington to try to get her daughter back. She isn't the only person that thinks that June should write this story down. After meeting with her mother, June goes to meet with Luke. These two are going their separate ways. Luke is headed to New York to fight, while June is headed to D.C. to get her daughter back. They both agree, though, they're going to meet later on. They will be reunited. But it's also clear that these two people are two different people, way different people. Before they do actually leave, though, Luke brings up the same thing to June that June's mom brought up to her. She should really write this down. And June shakes her head and says, No, I don't think so. But Luke says, "No, you really should. I mean, it couldn't have been all bad, right? You had help. You had Janine and Lawrence and Nick. I mean, people who loved you." And that's big. It's Luke acknowledging that the guy who was sleeping with his wife did actually care for her, which is cool, I guess. But he gives her the same encouragement. Write your story down. It's a really good one. After sleeping on it for a night, she decides, you know what, they're right. Before she leaves for D.C., she has one final place she wants to visit. It's her old home. Really, it's the old Waterford residence, and it's been destroyed. The bombs clearly got to it. It's been condemned. But June heads in anyway. She heads into her old bedroom. The message that was written on the wall, "Don't let the bastards grind you down," is still there. June reminiscing what her life in this building was like. And then she pulls out a recorder and starts to document everything that happened. And that is the end of The Handmaid's Tale. Thank you so much for watching these. I really do appreciate it. Consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you like this. Smash the thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. I probably did make a few mistakes with this one. Just let it go. You don't have to point out every single mistake like some people. You're not paying for these anyway. But you could. I mean, you could become a member, or you could subscribe to a Patreon, or you could buy a mug, and then you can criticize me all you want because you're paying me. Folks, I hate to say it, I'm baby shit soft, and nasty comments make me feel bad. That's the message I'm trying to get across here. But just know, I do appreciate the fact that you listened to this, and you watched it, and you got to this part of it, and I'll be back for, well, if they turn the spin-off into a show, I'll be back for that.